Thank you. Let us pray. Gracious God, we pray for our meeting tonight. We pray for productive and positive outcomes. May we speak with sensitivity and listen with respect. We pray for the work of the Council, for the Cabinet and the executive members and their portfolios, for non-executive councillors, area forums and other committees. In your presence, Lord, we pray for the Mayor, Councillor Thomas, the Leader of the Council, Councillor Greenhalgh, and the Chief Executive, Mr. Open. Bless and guide them in the specific roles they have. We are mindful at this present time of the many pressures facing the people of Bolton and conscious of how this impacts upon the work of the Council. We pray especially for members of the Bolton family who are suffering with mental health issues, face unemployment, have too much work, and are anxious about the future. May the collective wisdom of this body serve to alleviate some of those worries and concerns. God of love, hear these and all our prayers, spoken and unspoken. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Martin.
Thank you.
Members of the Council, it's time to start the meeting of the full Council. Mrs. Ridge, would you please confirm whether we have any apologies for absence, please?
Yes, we've got apologies from Councillor Eckersley-Fallon and Ken Bagnall.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Mrs. Thomas and I am the Mayor of Bolton for this municipal year. And I'd like to begin this evening with a minute's silence to mark the sad death of Captain Sir Tom Moore. Thank you, everybody. Could I also send condolences on behalf of the Council to all those who have sadly lost their lives to COVID since we last met, to all those who are still in hospital with it, and to all those who are struggling with long COVID and their families. I'd also once again like to thank all the key workers in the town. It's a year into the pandemic now, and many of you have continued to work for the whole year supporting others, and we'd just like to thank you. And a special thanks this time to Dr. Helen Wall and her team, her NHS colleagues, and all the volunteers who have been doing such a magnificent job vaccinating so many of us in the town. I'd just like that to be put on record. And again, once again, thank you to all the people of Bolton who continue to make such positive contributions to the borough during this difficult time. It certainly has been the year of volunteers and carers. Thank you very much. Are there any declarations of interest?
Madam Mayor, can I declare an interest under motions under Standing Order number 4, Councillor Sherrington's motion? If we do manage to get to it, I will leave the meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. Are there any others? No? No. Okay. Thank you. Your interest will be noted, and as you've said, you will leave the meeting when that item is considered. Chief Exec.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The next item of business is to confirm the minutes of the meeting of the Council held on the 13th of January 2021.
Are these approved, councillors?
Aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, councillors. Those are approved. Chief Exec.
Madam Mayor, the next item of business is to consider the motion for the 2021-2022 budget, council tax and other associate matters in the name of Councillor Greenhouse.
Before I ask Councillor Greenosh to move the motion, I've been asked to remind members that the mover of the budget motion and the mover of an amendment may speak for more than 5 minutes, but every other speaker is limited to the normal 5-minute rule. Councillor Greenosh.
Madam Mayor, members of the Council, when we last met as a council for a budget meeting over a year ago, there were few that could have predicted the year ahead and the massive challenges that we would face, not only as a borough, but as a nation and indeed globally. The cost to life and our freedoms, coupled with the massive economic impact as we fought an invisible and deadly foe. A year on, due to the magnificent work of the world's brightest and best scientists, some of which we can be proud to say are based and working here in the UK, vaccines have been invented, trialled and are being rolled out, which gives us at the very least light at the end of a tunnel and a pathway back to a degree of normality where friends and loved ones can be reunited safely once again. Whilst never wanting to diminish in any way the huge loss of life, we are here tonight to primarily discuss the financial impact of the pandemic, an impact on our economy that cannot be underestimated. On a national level, government packages of support have seen the Treasury taken into trillions of pounds of debt. And here in Bolton, on top of the COVID pressures and our response to the pandemic, we have the ongoing pressures in adults and children's services, the loss of income and revenue in our budget, which includes the Manchester Airport dividend, which last year brought in between 6 and 7 million, a reduction in our council tax and business rates take. On top of all that, an additional £8 million of deferred savings from the last Labour administration's budget, which chose to use reserves in order to defer the cuts to this budget in 21-22. The phrase perfect storm has been bandied about to signify the coming together of adverse forces to create significant challenges to navigate through. What that means in reality is a total indicative savings target for 21-22 of £32.3 million and £4.9 million for the following year. Whichever party were in control of the council, the challenge would be the same. The Deputy Chief Executive has also estimated that available balances as of the 31st of March 2021 will be 10.66 million, and that her strong advice to members is that as a minimum, balances of 10 million or higher should be maintained based upon the Deputy Chief Executive's understanding of the risks and financial issues facing the council over the next 3 years. In other words, no option to use reserves is available to us. It should also be acknowledged that one of the main warnings given by the corporate peer review group, led by the Labour leader at Barnsley Council, Steve Horton, was our use of reserves was not recommended in that it did not address the savings required, just moved the decision of how to make those savings to a time in the near future. At the start of the budget discussions last year, I made a commitment to make this budget process the most inclusive that it has ever been, acknowledging 2 hugely important issues. Firstly, as I have already said, this was a budget of unprecedented scale with a backdrop of a global crisis. And secondly, that there was absolutely a need to recognise that we were a minority administration, and that involvement from the whole council should be not just an ambition, but a reality. By acknowledging these 2 points, it was hoped that, as we have done on many other occasions before, we could find it possible to reach a place where party politics and political opportunism could be put to one side, and for us to come together to make the choices collectively in the best interests of the borough. I have done everything I can to encourage that joint working, with briefings offered to all members during the pre-consultation period and a genuine ask of members to come up with different options, and an acknowledgement from myself and my colleagues that any alternative suggestions would be looked into with a view to inserting them into the budget and removing other options. Nobody wants to bring forward proposals for cuts on this scale. Nobody goes into politics to take millions of pounds out of budgets. But if you are in politics, difficult decisions have to be faced and responsibility acknowledged. And whichever party had been in control, they would have been faced with delivering these cuts, and they would have had the responsibility of delivering a legal budget, just as the 9 Labour leaders of the other 9 Greater Manchester boroughs are proposing to do. Nobody wants to do this, and despite clamours of refuse to do it, despite clamours of it is immoral, despite clamours of tell the government no, all 9 Labour leaders of those Greater Manchester authorities are pressing ahead because they acknowledge uppermost in their mind the legal responsibility they have and the need to keep all decisions local. Just as the previous Labour administration here in Bolton, when they heard the cries from the gallery to refuse to go ahead with cuts, pressed ahead proposing those cuts because they accepted that legal responsibility to produce a balanced budget and acknowledged the reputational damage it would cause by not doing so to a borough like Bolton. Because even decisions like these, unpalatable as they may be, are best made by local people, as opposed to Westminster bureaucrats who would invade our borough, take over our decision making, which is the very real risk if we can't agree a legal budget. What greater incentive could there be for joint working? And over the past weeks, I have personally offered to meet with every single councillor. Some group leaders chose to send just their leadership, which is their prerogative, but all those meetings have taken place. Officers have also made themselves available to clarify positions or be there for advice if individuals or groups wanted to put together alternative schemes. I have to say, during that time, from pre-consultation briefings, through the consultation period, through scrutiny pre and post-consultation, and during talks following the consultation, very few alternative proposals were submitted for consideration by opposition parties. There were views expressed around certain lines within the budget and their opposition to them, but no alternative strategic savings were brought forward for consideration. I genuinely hope this is not through an unwillingness to participate, but more an acknowledgement that this isn't a politically ideological budget. It is simply not feasible to deliver transformational departmental change in the time these savings need to be delivered by. The administration and officer team approach this budget in the only way I think open to us, by starting from a very important premise. Acknowledging our statutory obligations as a council and protecting those services targeted at the most vulnerable in our borough, those in our care who look to us for help, support and protection. In addition, we wanted to give some protection to those front-facing environmental services that residents feel they get in return for the council tax they pay. We are committed to protecting bin collections. We were not prepared to move to a 3-weekly collection of a grey bin, like many of our GM Labour-controlled neighbours, or a monthly collection of a burgundy or a beige bin. We were not prepared to see a proportion of our litter bins removed throughout the borough as a budget option, as we commit this administration to a fight against litter louts and fly tippers. And we were not prepared to sell off the wonderful heritage of this town, such as Smithills Hall and Hallithwood Museum, all options we said no to. No, no, no. We said no to the closure of Startwell centres. Another option put before us because we, like every elected member, I hope, acknowledges and realises the essential need for early intervention services. No to the abolition of the youth play service, not a statutory obligation, but a service I hope respected and championed by many elected members and worth protecting. All these options we said no to. But can you guarantee, if this budget does not pass, that all these options may not go ahead as everything is thrown back into the mix and Whitehall officials take the reins? We promised to listen to members across all parties, and where requests were submitted, where possible, we have actioned those requests. We acknowledge the original proposal of the 3 days unpaid leave for staff at Christmas was contentious. The Liberal Democrat group made very public their opposition to this, and we were able to revise this following the announcement of the settlement, which saw an extra £3 million come Bolton's way. Given that a large percentage of that £3 million was available because of a reduced pay award, together with a willingness to listen and act on the views of other groups, it seemed only right to address this issue for staff and remove the 3-day proposal completely. Another alteration post-consultation and confirmation of the settlement was the removal of the budget saving regarding the Albert Halls. It still remains a commitment of this administration to find an alternative model for the running of the Albert Halls, which is still subsidised to the tune of £100,000 a year by Bolton residents. But we will not be closing it down or mothballing it. This is a premier location that should be making the council money. It is part of our proud heritage, and we would never want to give the impression that this fantastic building would be closing indefinitely. Once again, can we be absolutely sure that the Albert Halls would not be closed down immediately if outside officials came in? I think not. And finally, as a result of the additional settlement, let me clarify the position on council tax. I have been asked in formal meetings of this council by Labour representatives, given the state of the budget you are having to deliver, do you regret setting a 0% increase to the general levy of council tax last year? And will I learn from that this year by keeping the general levy at its assured rise of 2%? So let me answer Labour directly. No, I do not regret setting a 0% increase last year. And no, this administration will do its best to keep the council tax increase as low as it can be to help residents at this time while balancing the huge pressures we find ourselves in. And we will reduce the council tax general levy from the assumed assumption of 2% to 1.3%. I fully recognise to many people that will still be considered too much, particularly during these challenging times. But what I will say is we have done our very best to get council tax as low as it possibly can be, given the economic climate we find ourselves in and the compromises made due to our commitment to listening to other parties. And at 1.3% increase, it is one of the lowest increases of the general levy across all the Greater Manchester authorities. We are introducing a social care precept of 2.5%. We were allowed to go up to 3%, but I want to emphasise, as I'm sure my colleague, the Executive Cabinet member, will do so, verify later, we have to respond to the pressures within the area and the increase in care packages which will be with us post-COVID. I will make one very important further point on this issue, and that acknowledges my commitment to not being afraid to speak out against my own side when required. I hope I have demonstrated this in my leadership through the pandemic, when I have done my very best to put this borough and its residents before any party, political, tribal loyalty. And on this issue of the future funding for adult social care, it is first and foremost unsustainable to keep coming back to local government asking them to hike up council tax in order to pay for social care. This needs to be funded by central government and it needs to be sorted. I am heartened at the government paper that has been brought into the public domain regarding the commitment to the integration agenda of the NHS and social care, which, let's be honest, the pandemic has highlighted, and we must continue to lobby along with all party LGA to ensure this includes proposals for the delivery of future appropriate sustainable funding model for social care. While I'm dealing with council tax, let me also mention the Mayoral Precept, in particular the police precept, which is now to go up by £10 a household. I am sure the Executive Cabinet Member for Stronger Communities will be speaking on this, but let me also be very clear. We do not support this rise at this time for an organisation in special measures and deemed inadequate and failing. And in a year when millions of pounds of investment has gone into GMP from this government, I am proud my colleague on behalf of the council voted against this increase, unlike the 9 Labour representatives from the other boroughs who supported the increase. Executive Cabinet members will speak tonight on their individual portfolios. They will speak of the challenges, the difficult decisions, their priorities, and give assurances around service delivery and outcomes for our residents. Can I join them on behalf of the council to thank our staff for the work they have done during the pandemic and the work they continue to do. So many wonderful examples of our staff on the front line, from our teachers and bin men to our care workers and our finance teams administering grants and supports. So many redeployed into our council's humanitarian response to testing and track and trace, and to present day and to the rollout of our vaccination programme. And our thanks also to the officer team who have lived through this budget with us facing incredible difficult decisions, but with an eye always on the deliverability, quality and value for money of services and the protection of services to those most in need. Council business did not stop during COVID. Schemes such as our £12 million road improvement scheme pressed ahead during COVID, with over 250 highway schemes reaching completion. Grants submitted for High Streets Fund and Towns Fund, with a successful award of over £13 million confirmed for Farnworth, and a hugely significant and successful rollout of the Bolton Fund, reaffirming this administration's unprecedented commitment to the voluntary and community sector. What more evidence can there be of the importance of a thriving voluntary sector than seeing the hundreds of volunteers that have come forward to assist in the humanitarian response and the vaccination rollout? Targeted support for voluntary groups addressing key issues identified as strategically crucial by our Joint Strategic Needs Assessment. But let us not underestimate the potential risk of some of this work that I have just listed if external bureaucrats take over decision making. They may not share our priorities. We have seen so-called bailouts of other authorities, yet do not be fooled. This is not free money. These are loans that have to be paid back from revenue budgets with further impacts on our frontline services. And yes, they may have some permission to convert capital into revenue, but which capital projects will be sacrificed? Our programmes, our road programmes, where all councillors have just submitted a further tranche of improvements for their areas. Our voluntary sector, the 16 million of district funds. Horwich, Blackrod, West Horton, Farnworth, Kersey and Little Lever, our town centre regeneration plans, the capital investment put aside for the Jubilee Centre, West Horton Town Hall, Little Lever Health Centre, or the proposed medical school, or our climate change, cleaner and greener initiatives. These are our priorities that we have chosen. But if capital is to be transferred into revenue, capital has to come from somewhere. I also want to touch on the potential reputational damage the inability to pass a balanced budget would cause, particularly around those looking to invest in the town, those looking to relocate businesses and create jobs. At a time when we are nearing completion of regeneration schemes and looking to get them across the line, when we need to promote our borough to developers, entrepreneurs and investors, do we really want the reputation of a council that can't agree a budget and has to get the government brought in to sort it out for us? Nobody in this meeting tonight underestimates the challenge before us. Nobody underestimates that for many tonight, this is an incredibly difficult decision. But the reality is, next year, if we don't address the problem, we will be spending £31 million more than we've got. And if we don't address it, others will come in and do it for us, with no local input and with no local democratic challenge from scrutiny or exec cabinet member meetings that are a proud part of our process. There is a challenge for us in local government to get real change in allocations and funding models from Westminster. Local government has been disproportionately affected. Governments of all colours have had this attitude towards local government, and that is the mindset we have to change. And for those that challenge that, what greater evidence of that is there than what happened last Wednesday in Parliament? We will hear tonight from certain quarters that this budget is immoral and that the local government settlement is an insult. Well, last Wednesday, the local government settlement was debated in Parliament, where the Labour group in Parliament did not even bother to oppose it. I repeat, the Labour group in Parliament did not oppose the local government settlement. They did not even raise an objection, so the local government settlement was unanimously passed. The Liberal Democrats could have forced a vote but chose not to. So our fight is not with each other. As I said earlier, no matter who was in control, it would still be the same level of cuts required to balance the books. It is the changing attitude of Westminster as a whole towards local government. That is the challenge, and the last thing we want is Westminster officials running our borough. Madam Mayor, members of the council, a genuine attempt has been made by myself to reach out across the political divides to produce this budget, which has listened and been prepared to accept compromise. I thank all those who have been willing to participate, who have been prepared to put tribal politics to one side and do what is genuinely in the best interests of this borough. I do not believe the public wish to see political infighting over this, nor do they want to see non-elected outsiders come to our borough to make the decisions that they elected us to make. None of us wish to be in this position, but we have a responsibility, just as those did who have gone before us, that we cannot ignore. Madam Mayor, I formally move the budget recommendations as indicated on the order paper for the years 21-22 be approved.
Hear, hear.
Not quite sure who that was then. Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. Could I begin by thanking the officer team, particular Sue Johnson, for all their help and support in putting the budget together. Sue manages to make a very difficult process simple so that councillors can understand what the budget entails. Every May, Madam Mayor, the full council elects a leader whose job it is to select a cabinet to make executive decisions on behalf of the council and in turn be accountable for those decisions. And there is no more important decision than agreeing a budget proposal and putting it before members. In doing this, Madam Mayor, the leader and the cabinet have been conscious from the very start that we operate as a minority administration in a chamber that includes, at the last count, which was taken last night, so it may well have changed, includes 8 different groups. So pity, Madam Mayor, any leader who has to bring together such a wide array of opinions and points of view. But I firmly believe that this executive, but Councillor Greenhalgh in particular, has done everything he can to reach out to as many members as possible. I know he has held unilateral, bilateral, trilateral, and even quadrilateral meetings in order to explain the issues we are facing. Not only that, Madam Mayor, he's accommodated views and ideas and adopted them into the budget process. And speaking frankly, I'm not sure anyone could have reached out in the way that Councillor Greenhalgh has in order to make this, what is a divisive issue, as inclusive as he can. The consequences of not passing a budget are fourfold. Firstly, we create uncertainty amongst our staff. who have gone through quite enough of that in the last few weeks. Secondly, we create anxiety for people who depend on our services for their health and welfare. Thirdly, what message does our failure to pass a budget send to those investors looking to make a long-term commitment to our town and district centres? And fourthly, old hands at this job know the consequences of not passing a budget. It is to take the decision-making process out of the hands of the very people who are most connected with the citizens of this town and put it in the hands of central government. There is much that divides us, Madam Mayor. However, I think the one thing that should bring us together is our desire as a town, as councillors, to control our own destiny. What would be more demoralising to this chamber to know that whoever we choose in that meeting in May matters not a jot, because the big decisions, the biggest of all for us, is not taken here but somewhere in Whitehall, on whom none of us are likely to have any influence whatsoever. And why, Madam Mayor, in the middle of a global pandemic, with all the uncertainty swirling around us, would we want to add to that? By not passing a budget and adding to the anxiety that so many people already feel. Most of the public, Madam Mayor, are not interested in the parlour games of politics. It doesn't interest them who is up or who is down. They simply expect us as a council to provide the services they want and in some cases desperately need. And we can only do that if we pass a budget. Madam Mayor, the public expects us to pass a budget. The public wants us to pass a budget. And tonight, Madam Mayor, I hope all fair-minded councillors recognise Councillor Greenhouse has done everything he could to be as inclusive as he can, and we should tonight, Madam Mayor, get behind him, get this job done and pass this budget. I second the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Cox.
Madam Mayor, the next item of business is to consider an amendment to the motion in the name of Councillor Heslop.
Councillor Heslop.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of the Council, in the short 2 years that I have been a member of this Council, it certainly has been interesting. Without doubt, this evening's Council meeting is the most important meeting that I've attended, and I'm sure that it possibly ranks as one of the most important, if not the most important, in nearly 40 years of the history of this Council. Firstly, could I thank Democratic Services team for helping me to get my head around the process involved in getting this proposed amendment to this point. According to the Council's Constitution, I'm only able to speak once in the Cabinet's recommendations to the Council, my own proposed amendment and the proposed amendments of Councillors Hayes and Wilkinson. I'll try to get all these issues covered in distinct parts. Firstly, in respect to the main recommendations made by the Cabinet to this Council, the outcome of the Council's decision will have huge implications for Kearsley and the wider borough. And I can say that I will make my decision once we have looked at all the points in the debate. At the previous council meeting, I was swayed from my preconceived voting intention by the Labour group's arguments in respect of Harvey's nursery, and I will apply the same principle. Having said this, the ruling Conservatives have a head start, as I have had two heated debates with the leader. I have been through the budget lines on the budget report with the leader and argued on some very specific points. On the other hand, I have not been approached by the Labour group leader nor the Liberal Democrats group leader. Both, I believe, may be opposing or abstaining when it comes to the vote. If I were to stick to the principles of 1 Kearsley, then tonight's vote offers a golden opportunity to have an in-depth look at the decisions taken in the past along with an investigation into my perception of Bolton-centric decision-making that I believe has so hugely negatively affected Kearsley. However, I may also be swayed by the holistic argument that if we make the wrong decision, then Kearsley and the other areas of the borough could be worse off. I naturally assume that any group opposing the budget motion may have additional concerns. I know that a lot of members have been keeping their cards close to their chests. I would summarise my voting intention tonight as if you want my vote, then you've got to fight for it tonight. I'll move on to the Liberal Democrats' proposed amendment. I must say that I strongly agree with 5 points in Councillor Hayes' amendment, and may vote for that amendment. In respect of Councillor Wilkinson's, I would like the council to note, the members to note, that it should be probably instructed to look at the around about councils. When I came up with the proposed 69-seat council, Bolton Council, it should be noted that currently each 3 councillors of a ward cover 14,377 residents on average. And this compares with 11,120 in Rochdale, 11,176 in Bury and 13,120 in Wigan. If the proposed 69 councillors had gone through, then the same councillors in this borough would have had 12,502 residents, which is still more residents per councillor than their counterparts in Bury and Rochdale, and only 600 less than councillors in Wigan. Also, as far as I'm concerned, the cake, or the total cost of the councillor allowances, could have stayed the same size, and that councillors just received a smaller slice. I hope that other members introduce other arguments for the need of effective number of councillors, especially with upcoming and existing challenges that we face. I would have been able to support this amendment, but would, as I say, would support Councillor Hayes. Moving on to my proposed amendment. Last year was the first time that I attended a budget as a councillor, and it was noted that there were 2 amendments that did not directly impact the Cabinet's recommendations for the budget, one by the Liberal Democrats and one by UKIP. In many ways, my proposed amendment is similar to UKIP's, which in part aim to get any excess capital in wards spent in wards based on merit submitted by ward councillors. I fully accept that members may disagree with and vote against my proposed amendment, yet they probably may agree with it in spirit. I have toyed with the implications of amending the scheme, particularly where this may be abused by those seeking election or indeed re-election. And I would hope that ethics guides members that decide to use the facility and that they do so in a confidential manner and in the spirit of the reason that this change is being proposed. I am also mindful that we should be encouraging younger residents to come forward and represent their communities. I am of course aware of 2 councillors in Farnwood with young children, and that those hard-working councillors are probably receiving an allowance that equates to much less than that's in a conventional work environment. And it should be also noted that the number of councillors with young children may increase in the next municipal year. I am aware that members are already sacrificing their allowances for charities and community groups in their wards, and by amending the system we will make best use of this allowance sacrifice scheme that will direct much needed funding to funding that is close to all 3 councillors, that is, hearts. And so, on to the amendment. I formally propose that the recommendation by the Cabinet is amended so that if an individual member agrees to forego all or part of their basic and or special allowance and makes this wish known at the beginning of the municipal year, that the amount is released after each quarter to the Area Forum budget. The awarding of grants in respect of the enhanced Area Forum budget will be subject to the existing criteria and same decision-making process. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Heslop. Councillor Patterson.
Madam Mayor, just before we go live, I'm going to leave my camera off because I am having connectivity issues and I'd rather be heard. So I'll leave my camera off, okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Pattison, because your camera is off, you won't see the live stream. Can you just proceed, please?
Yeah, of course. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I formally second the amendment, Madam Mayor. I won't go over Councillor Eslop's valid points due to time restraints, and we'll just go straight on to the budget, which has been a rollercoaster of emotions for myself, working with welfare rights daily and also knowing the impact that this will have on many of our vulnerable has caused me great concern. I will also be one of the many people that deal with the aftermath of this decision, and that feels wrong. When a local authority such as ours are being forced into an impossible situation due to fiscal constraints and false promises, manifesting as insufficient funding and extreme cuts by central government, then we are in a bad place. Legacy debt and central government have put us in this position. On the other hand, the fact that this council cannot come to a decision or take politics out of the arena saddens me. If this budget is not passed, then we have failed our communities as a democracy. An S114 is not the answer. We should control our services and finances, not central government. If the bailiffs were knocking on the door, you would not give them control of your accounts. I believe we are in a dangerous position and cannot continue on the road of 2010 cuts. A Public Accounting Committee report on the whole of government accounts for 2018-19 published recently said the government's exposure as the funder of the last resort meant the precarious financial position of local authorities presented a significant risk. We are now at the point of significant risk, along with the letdown of significant financial support to help ride the COVID storm by ministers. And we are still none the wiser what the financial impact looks like. I believe this council should join other local authorities and lobby central government demanding fiscal devolution, greater funding local authority and letting democratic elected members decide on local priorities such as services, taxes and business rates. We know the needs of our communities, not central government. So I will support this budget as I believe we fight injustice and not chuck the towel in. Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council.
Thank you, Councillor Pattison. Chief Exec.
Madam Mayor, the next item of business is to consider a second amendment to the motion in the name of Councillor Hayes.
Councillor Hayes.
Madam Mayor, fellow members of the council, can I start by thanking the officers, particularly Sue Johnson and Tony Oakman, for their hard work and the time they've willingly given to keep the various groups updated. Also thanks to the leader of the council, Councillor David Greenhalgh, for his openness and willingness to listen. I also want to recognise that Councillor Greenhalgh has taken issue with his own government to try to get a better deal for Bolton. He's not had a lot of success, but he did try hard, I'm sure. I'd congratulate him on his speech tonight, which was a polished performance, and I agreed with a large number of things he said, and he agreed with a lot of things in our amendment, so he almost is moving it for me, but we'll see how he votes later on. I hope he will support. This budget, with over £32 million of further cuts and more to follow next year, will have a massive impact on the people we represent, particularly the more vulnerable. Nobody, I'm sure, seeks to deny that. All we councillors can do is to reduce the impact where we can. Coming on top of the other massive cuts since 2010, we will have had to have cut £225 million from our budget. And despite what some people like to pretend, cuts started well before 2010. Have no doubt, this budget has been described as immoral, and I believe it is an immoral budget, and it's entirely due to government policy. Government controls what resources we have, and to a large extent, what we can spend it on. Whichever party or parties were in control, we would be facing similar situations and problems. The figures are the figures. We tried as a council unanimously to get the government to give more leeway in how we achieved our cuts. Councillor Peel's motion was worthwhile trying, but we got nowhere. I believe the government has not even yet had the courtesy to reply. Local government funding is complicated and difficult to explain to a layman. But if we exclude school funding, which is ring-fenced and largely protected, and just look at normal council income, our resources have dropped £15 million in real terms between 2010 and 2020. When inflation is taken into account, the drop is much, much higher. This, remember, at a time when there are increasing demands on our children's and adult social services, and our road network has massive arrears of maintenance. The government has deliberately and drastically reduced grants it used to give, so that council funding will rely almost entirely on council tax and business rates, very different from the old rate support grant when I came into the council. The council or government has repeatedly promised a fair funding review, but has yet to deliver on it. We badly need it, but the cynic in me doubts whether it really will result in anything fair for local government. History is not on its side. Similarly, government has promised a national scheme for adult social care. Apart from a botched attempt from Theresa May, nothing has emerged. There should be a properly funded national scheme, not a sticking plaster by a council tax. And I very much welcome the leader's very firm statement along the same lines. Now is not the time for pressing for specific increases to particular budgets. We've had a long-standing priority to improve the state of the borough's roads. Some improvement has been made via the 12 million investment in residential roads and pavements, but that is against an estimate of well over 100 million of arrears made several years ago. The current winter will certainly have led to a further deterioration. It may be that there is less of a problem with capital than there is with the revenue budget. But if there is, we urge the Cabinet to try and find some resources to make another dent in the highway maintenance arrears. If this was a normal budget, we would also be urging the Council to increase expenditure on health, but we realise that must remain an aspiration at the present time. During the pandemic, many groups of people have done superb work, often way beyond their terms of employment. Rightly, much public attention is concentrated on the NHS, but we all know that more quietly, many of our own staff have performed superbly. We should be applauding and thanking them, and this amendment presents members with another opportunity to do that. I think my point was even emphasised by a press release that went out today, stating the social care staff's performance during the pandemic, which was magnificent. Now, in that context, it was very for one of the proposals to seek to save £1.2 million by an imposed pay cut on employees. My group, as the leader has said, made very strong representation against that. And I'm delighted to say that the leader and his cabinet listened and were able to remove that proposal from the budget. We thank them for that. It's often said that nobody goes into local politics to make cuts. Mostly true. I will just say two words: Eric Pickles. The former Conservative leader of Bradford, then government minister, delighted in offering up cuts in local government funding after the financial crisis. Alistair Darling, as we know, had warned of cuts worse than Thatcher, quote, if Labour won the 2010 election, and most remember Liam Burns' note that there was no more money left, which he left for his successor. But it was Eric Pickles, who really set about undermining local government with an almost crusading zeal. At one time, I wondered whether the problem was that central government just did not understand what local government does and its value. That may be true, but after Eric Pickles, I'm now convinced that this government does not care and treats local government with contempt. It has a deliberate strategy of undermining local democracy. Just a few examples in recent years: the removal of our housing function, the breaking down of our coordinating role in education, which means that we can't really plan anything on the education front anymore. And more recently, the moves to limit our powers on planning, which this council again resolved unanimously to oppose. All those convince me that the strategy is deliberate. What next? Forced mergers of local authorities and further reduction of our functions? That is already beginning to happen in many of the counties like Lancashire. This budget will have a massive impact on the council services, its employees and the residents of the borough, particularly those who are most vulnerable. There is no way we can support it. Voting it down would be an easy thing to do. However, if councillors all have to think, what will happen if no budget can be set? We move into section 114 territory. That will result in government appointing commissioners to come in and set it for us. The leader gave examples of what might happen if that was done. They wouldn't care about our priorities. They've got a job to do. Reimposing cuts like the reduction in employee pay may well find their way back into the budget, as may charging the maximum permissible council tax. Would that be better than what we're considering tonight? I believe it would be even worse. That is why we will be abstaining on the budget tonight. We can't support it, but voting it down to me is also unthinkable. We want the council to send a very clear message on what these cuts will mean. I really do believe that we will soon become incapable of performing even our basic statutory functions. I hope that Councillor Greenhoff and his group will show the courage that they have to some extent already and be prepared to vote with us on this. It might have more effect on the Conservative government if their local Conservative group make the same signals. I'm concerned, let me say, to hear rumours that some councillors are saying that they hope the council does issue a section 114 notice. I hope I'm mistaken on that. Perhaps leaders of other groups can take the opportunity of this debate to confirm or not if it's their group intention. I certainly hope it isn't. Dealing with Councillor Heslop's amendment, yes, if he wants that to happen, I see no reason why a councillor shouldn't be able to do that and divert the funds that are saved by cuts in their allowances to their area forum, and we will be supporting that amendment. Madam Mayor, I have pleasure in moving our amendment on the order paper and urge all members to give it their support. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Hayes. Councillor Newall.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to address the reasons why we're here tonight and having to make this decision. Austerity always has been and always was an ideological choice of the Tory party. It was never a financial necessity. Austerity has starved local government of the resources needed to properly fund essential services, and there is a constant litany of broken promises and failure by this government. But you would be forgiven for thinking that they came into power in December 19, ushering in a new dawn led by their golden boy, Boris Johnson. But as Baudelaire said, the devil's greatest achievement is in convincing people that he doesn't exist. Since 2010, Tory cuts have included 21,000 police officers, 600 police stations, 50 fire stations, 675 libraries, 15,200 NHS beds. The list goes on. Austerity kills communities. Austerity kills, full stop. There's no money for local government, but there's a magic money tree for PR consultants, 3 of which are employed by Number 10 to portray the PM in a positive light. They spent a full morning last week photographing the Prime Minister's dog. I'm sure NHS staff everywhere will be thrilled to see the results. Of course, there is also plenty of money for Serco shareholders too, and PPE contractors who happen to be friends with Dominic Cummings and Matt Hancock. Matt Hancock has said that he believes that local authorities are the most appropriate purse holders when it comes to dealing with poverty. This might be feasible if they weren't straining to maintain services because of a lack of funds. There are so many holes in the welfare safety net, maliciously sabotaged by Tory ideology, that this net quite often fails the very people it is supposed to help. We now have 1.3 million under 5s living in poverty. A third of all under 19s living in poverty. And the Roundtree Foundation predict that by 2024, there will be another 734,000 people living in poverty. Pre-pandemic, this Tory government were responsible for a decade of wage stagnation, rising inequality, soaring child poverty, in-work poverty, homelessness and malnutrition. Yet backed by a compliant media, they continue to push the narrative that none of this is down to them or due to their policies. Voltaire said, "Those who can make you believe in absurdities can make you perform atrocities." And talking of absurdities, Johnson said last week, "I want to get people into jobs and I'm proud of our response to child poverty." What next from Boris? The Great Chimney Sweep Initiative? Workhouses for the 21st century? In local government, we are now at a tipping point where statutory services are at risk, and further cuts will make it impossible for councils to function or deliver. So please, let us write to the Prime Minister and Robert Jenrick in the strongest terms. But we have the perennial problem here of local Tories distancing themselves from the Tory government and the fallout from the Tory ideology. I have a certain sympathy with Bolton Tories. They're not responsible for Tory policy decisions in Whitehall, and they're certainly not responsible for the behaviour of their ministers. But I say this to Tories, every time you knock on a door, every time you post a leaflet, and every time you support and applaud policies and speeches, you endorse people like Jacob Rees-Mogg. You validate people like Mark Francois, and you enable Michael Gove and Boris Johnson. So yes, local Tories must bear some of the responsibility for this dreadful government. But I'm sure you were given to believe that you could expect so much more from Boris and was let down by him. That, my friends, is the story of Johnson's life. So please support this amendment. We cannot carry on like this. You're lurching from year to year, living in fear of being able to set legal budgets. Colleagues, it's very important that our voices are heard. I second this amendment. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Madam Mayor, the next item of business is to consider a third amendment in the name of Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think members will be aware that tonight's meeting is probably one of the most difficult we've had in many years. Some of us who have been on the council for some time, I was first elected way back in 1984, I've never seen a budget which will have such a devastating effect upon this council. In all that time I've been a councillor, we've always had cuts. Even when we've had additional funding from central government or additional funds in various disguises, we've always had cuts. There's always been a little bit snipped off here and there. In the last few years, we have seen major cuts, which have reduced the scope and the size of this authority, together with virtually every authority up and down the country. In our case, we have seen a reduction in our budget of 50%, roughly by about £220 million. In the same time, we've seen a reduction of our staff from by about 40%, roughly around some 2,500 people. In the same time, everyone who is left working for this authority has done more and done more and done more as roles and jobs are combined and put together. And I'd like to say a big thanks to all of those staff who have picked up the slack and carried on and done more and done a bit more and done a bit more, as each year we have lost more staff and more budgets. But one of the things which has not changed is the number of councillors, and this is the reason of my amendment tonight and my colleague's amendment. As I say, I was first elected way back in 1984, and the council was a different animal way back then. It had more staff, more money, more resources, and to a certain extent, more responsibilities. Things like the housing department, which is now become Bolton at home. The education department, which actually looked after every school within the borough. The vast majority of our schools are no longer local authority controlled. Social services, which has also seen major changes and has now become Bolton Cares. Our leisure departments, which are now part of a trust. So the entire work remit of many councillors and many committees, etc., have changed. We then went to the executive member system, probably one of the greatest disasters in local government ever foisted on us by Tony Blair. So the world of local government has changed considerably. We have seen many dedicated, hard-working men and women go because of those cuts. The only thing which has not altered in any shape or form in terms of numbers is the size of the council. It is, of course, turkeys voting for Christmas. The recent announcement of the boundary changes, which this authority is going to go through, as well as all the other authorities in Greater Manchester, was an opportunity. Councillor Heslop mentioned the numbers which in other authorities of residents. I have to say that's immaterial, because we compare that against the things we are asking officers and members of staff to do in comparison to what was before. And I think it is incumbent upon us as elected members to take some of that pain, reduce the size of our council. We did suggest that the size of the council be reduced to 50. That would have produced savings around £150,000 per year. And we could have done things in a different way. By the fact that the proposals put forward by various groups to the Boundary Commission meant we weren't going to make any progress at all. We weren't prepared as a council to accept some pain and some sacrifice, but we would carry on as normal. The proposals by the two major groups to accept status quo at 60 was unacceptable, and the idea that we would even increase the size of the council from 63 to 69 was even more bizarre. The leader of the council, right at the beginning of the debate, said difficult decisions. And yes, over the past few years, there have been some extremely difficult decisions, and there'll be more coming out of the budget proposals over the next 2 years, some of them which are totally unpalatable. The deputy leader of the council mentioned in his comments the perception of the public. The perception of the public will be the council remains the same. The turkeys will not vote for Christmas, but cuts will be imposed. Staff will go. Staff will be asked to do even more with even less. And that will leave a very sour taste in the perception of the public. I therefore would like to move my amendment as on the order paper. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Vevers.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. It's not that long ago we heard this government repeatedly insist that there's no magic money tree, and yet it seems that it now expects local authorities to somehow find one. So here we are now looking at a budget that will inevitably and regrettably cost jobs within the council, a budget that's going to hit services right across the borough, a budget that will have implications for a vast number of residents within Bolton. In this motion, we propose cutting the number of councillors by 10, which would not only save £150,000, but would demonstrate to the public that although this is a budget that nobody actually wants to deliver, we are in fact all in this together. And yet two parties within this chamber propose maintaining the status quo, and two parties, I still find this hard to believe, suggest that we increase the number of councillors by 3. Of course, one member went as far as putting forward an increase of 9 councillors, and although he has explained tonight in some detail that he based his figures on a councillor versus residents ratio, which would be something to consider if we weren't facing the level of cuts we're discussing this evening. Westminster is expecting this council, and on this point, both the executive and to some extent the leader have my sympathy. This government is expecting the council to maintain essential services while at the same time spending £36 million less on those very same services. So how anyone could think that increasing the number of councillors is either advisable, prudent or sensible at a time like this is beyond my reckoning. What are we saying here? Dear residents of Bolton, we're sorry about your nurseries. We're sorry about your bowling greens. We're sorry about your libraries. We're sorry about your allotments. We're sorry about your lollipop men and women. We're sorry that services are overstretched and neighbourhoods face decline. But rest assured, the money we are saving is helping to increase the number of councillors that will help protect the things you value and cherish. Is that what we're saying? To take no action to keep the number of councillors the same at a time when the council has lost many of its functions. As Councillor Wilkinson said, education has seen a shift to academy schools, and we have seen many schools outsource their cleaning and catering contracts, or in housing where Bolton at Home is now responsible for social housing and a whole raft of other things. To keep this number of councillors when the number of council employees has fallen by over 40% and the revenue budget has been slashed within an inch of its life can in no way be seen as justifiable. Madam Mayor, members of the council, I second this motion.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Vivers. I'm just going to read something out to members before we begin the debate. The council has the original motion and a number of amendments to that motion to consider. These amendments seek to add additional words to Councillor Greenlodge's motion rather than replacing it as a substantive motion. Once the debate has concluded, council will be asked to consider each amendment in the order they were received. If an amendment is approved, the wording is added to the original motion and becomes the substantive motion before the vote on the substantive motion is taken. The motion and amendments are before council and they are now open to debate. And I've already had several people indicating they'd like to speak. The first person is Councillor Howarth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A swift economic recovery in Bolton will only be possible if government supports the council budget. This is why we should not support this council budget that puts the people here in harm's way. The government with low interest rates can borrow and support local government. I'm not asking the government to borrow indefinitely, just borrow enough to support councils that need it. Support the borough out of COVID recovery. Why aren't you holding your ministers' feet to the fire on this leader? The more the council does in the first year after the pandemic, the better things will be in the long term. Council needs to help to reduce the worst excess of poverty, hardship and unemployment, provide humanitarian support, care for families, help people get skills, training and jobs. Our council cannot continue to maintain vital public services and act as a coronavirus fourth emergency service by operating on goodwill or fresh air. Elected members can speak up, for the people here and defend them. This is my duty, my obligation to the people here. My duty is not to the government. There is no fiduciary duty more important than the allegiance that many elected members have to the people of the borough. Services for youths, for families who struggle. Lots of reports show the good value for taxpayers of these local government services. We need more of them to help stem the tide of the big growth in demand for expensive children's services. Why the Cabinet not demanding this from ministers? Plenty of businesses do not balance their budgets every year while still remaining a going concern, and neither do other public sector bodies like the NHS. They're able to carry budgets forward, deficits if needed. Some of you have been told that Sigoma is rejecting the case for deficit budgets, but Solace, the company that represents the senior managers of local governments, say the government should consider allowing councils to carry forward budget deficits like the NHS can over a limited period of time, say 5 years, before returning to a balanced position. This technical cost-free change would provide councils with a powerful tool to manage their finances more holistically and would therefore enable local authorities to avoid making drastic cuts to vital services. That's Solace. Councils are still operating under legislation to manage their finances to ensure that they provide best value whilst not running a budget deficit, yes. However, the current legislation is designed to address cases of financial failure in councils, so there is no point tonight haranguing me about legal and fiduciary responsibilities. This is a pandemic, unprecedented situation. The legislation does not match up. Why are we having 3 times less investment in Bolton Council and some other similar northern councils compared to Berkshire Council, Surrey, Gloucestershire? Why this massive difference? A homeless man from Bolton, aged 24, just died on the streets. In Bolton, more people are in hardship, defaulting on bills. We have many people who have debt and struggle before the pandemic. Why are ministers obsessed with balanced budget or orthodoxy when there are children in poverty here who need free food? The Conservative Council here, you need to stop supporting your ministers and your MPs, but you won't. The council cabinet say they have stood up to the government, who are raining down the most hideous cuts on this council. Hideous tonight. This council needs finance to keep providing the valuable services. Have the cabinet stood up to the government? Have you? Or are you possibly blowhards? All talk, but no real action, no real success in achieving better finances for this council, and we deserve it from this government. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Hear, hear.
Thank you, Councillor Howarth. The next one is Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've been called some things in my time, but I've not been called a blowhard. I can assure Councillor Howarth as well that the Cabinet, and particularly the leader, has been making all the representations that she declares she wants to make. But I'll get on with my speech if I may, Madam Mayor. I want to start by thanking the whole of the Adult Services team for their dedication and support during what has been a very difficult process for everyone. But instead of being negative, they chose to take the opportunity to innovate and think outside the box to achieve the proposed saving targets now tabled before us. I think at this time, that's already been stressed by previous speakers, the residents of our borough would prefer stability rather than the risk of the council being run by unelected bureaucrats imposed upon us if we do not set a legal budget. So I want to focus my speech on the positives and tell members about what we've achieved and improved and why I believe we need the proposed increase to the social care precept of 2.5% to continue that progress. We have achieved so much in the 2 years since this cabinet took over the running of the council. We've opened new supported living apartments for younger people with disabilities, providing deserved improvement to their housing offer, which in turn increases their independence and quality of life. We've established a transition team for young people with disabilities to ensure improved outcomes and clearer pathways during their transition from children's to adult services. The Adults Department achieved all of the £7 million saving requirements during the last budget cycle, ceasing services that were not value for money or effective, such as re-enablement night service and the handy person service. We successfully implemented the community meals review, with service users receiving an improved alternative provision whilst meeting our savings targets. Some said this could not be done and predicted starving and dehydrated residents left for days without any contact, which in reality couldn't have been further from the truth. We've reduced demand on services despite the continued growth in our population and the need to meet more complex needs by investing in the Bolton Fund, targeting innovation by our voluntary sector partners and our communities. Our safeguarding partnership won an award for the work it's done on financial abuse and loan sharks, protecting some of the most financially vulnerable in our town. And as a directorate, we have significantly progressed on our journey of integration by establishing the Integrated Care Partnership, making commissioning decisions with our health partners. We successfully recruited to the ICP management team, appointing Rachel Tanner as the managing director, whilst retaining her responsibilities as the director of adult services, supported by our assistant directors, Paul Lee and Tracy Minshall, along with successfully recruiting an independent chair for the ICP in Sally McIver. The ICP has been fundamental in our response to COVID. It has facilitated the speed of integration and the whole system response on all fronts, including the stepping up of our hospital discharge pathways, with over 96% people discharged home in line with our Living Well strategy, and also contributed to the management of the normal winter pressures, but also, and probably more importantly, wave 3 of the pandemic. Our intermediate tier offer was reconfigured mid-pandemic to deliver residential and nursing care with designated COVID pathways, allowing onward safe discharge to home or into the care of our private sector partners. We sourced and distributed thousands of items of PPE to the sector and carers. We supported our social care partners throughout and continue to do so with advice and support, whilst distributing resources in a fully integrated way with our health partners. We received over £6.2 million from government to support the adult social care response to COVID, most of which was passported directly to providers to support infection control initiatives, to facilitate safe visiting by family members, and also ensured that staff who were having to isolate continued to receive their full pay. We established a single point of contact for both health and social care at Castle Hill, another example of excellent partnership working. We enhanced our neighbourhood teams and worked with our voluntary sector champions to reach out to people shielding and vulnerable. And to date, we've supported the vaccination of over 4,500 social care workers in Bolton, reached out and supported housebound vaccinations with our primary care colleagues, and delivered learning disability specific vaccination clinics. But most importantly, we have not raised the bar with regards to the eligibility criteria to access any of our services. As previously said, our officers took the opportunity to innovate, provide more cost-effective and joined-up services with our partners that still meets our residents' needs. We have come so far with regards to the integration of our services with those of our partners, which as a result has benefited some of the most vulnerable. And I do not believe we should do anything to jeopardise that progress at this time. As we enter the next phase of the pandemic, some of our residents and carers will need more support than ever before. Many of our carers have continued to provide unpaid care for their loved ones whilst being isolated and having limited access to additional family networks or support systems. As we move into the recovery phase, support for our most vulnerable will come from our social care workforce, system partners and our voluntary and community sector providers. We need to continue to show our support as we ensure that those residents who have been shielding or are clinically vulnerable start to adjust to a new normal. We also have lots of exciting projects in the pipeline to look forward to, not least the replacement of the Jubilee Centre set to start in 2021. I'm just finishing, Madam Mayor, May.
Okay, you've had your 5 minutes.
So with that said, I would again respectfully ask that members set aside our political differences, do what's best for our towns and borough and support not only the 2.5% increase in the social care precept, but also the whole budget proposals to allow our integration journey to continue for the benefit of all our residents requiring support. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Morgan. I wasn't sure you were aware that you'd gone over your 5 minutes. Councillor Allen.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. May I begin first of all by thanking the Deputy Chief Executive for responding very promptly to my queries, not just this year, but over many years, because I have set some challenging questions. Way back when I was first elected, and it is quite a long time ago, I was asked to write a brief statement to accompany my entry on the council website. Few other councillors published a statement, but I did, and it seems I'm now one of just 3 that have a public declaration. My website's entry begins, and it's still there by the way, it begins with the comment that I expect the council to deliver the best possible service for the lowest possible cost. And I still stand by that goal to this day, and I believe council budgets should deliver that ambition for the benefit of council taxpayers. Year after year, I've tried to convince the Conservative group that their budget proposals should include more radical and major changes to the way services are delivered, but I'm afraid my suggestions have fallen largely on deaf ears. So now I'm free from the shackles of the political whip and unhindered by the drive for political gain, I can share my strategy with you and with the public. I had hoped that this first Tory budget might look different from previous Labour budgets and address some of the big strategic issues. But it turns out to be just the usual tinkering at the edges. We have to look at issues, big issues, such as outsourcing, divestment, management buyouts, and staff costs. We need to decide what business the council is in. Are we here to sweep the streets, empty the bins, cut the grass, and look after our vulnerable people? Or are we in the loss-making businesses of pantomimes, promotions and politics? Always remember that the budget is about how we spend taxpayers' money, and that means it should be transparent. I have great respect for our Deputy Chief Executive, but unfortunately we are saddled with an antiquated government accounting system that does not readily allow cost centre analysis. We really don't know whether our many non-statutory activities are profitable or not. It's an accounting system that may be acceptable to Bob Cratchit, but it's certainly not acceptable to Bob Allen. There are many good reasons why, as a council, we may want to carry on with a loss-making service, but we should know the scale of the loss. Through the budget consultation, the public should be aware that the council is losing money for a good purpose. All of our so-called trading accounts and regulatory services, like planning and licensing, should have separate cost centre profit and loss accounts. We should not be engaged in activities that lose money unless the council agrees that there are measurable benefits, such as employment or health. We should know for sure whether or not our fees and charges cover the real costs of regulatory activities like planning and licensing. So I'm disappointed, for example, that a review of Albert Hall's business has been taken out of the budget. If there are savings to be made, they should be made. We owe it to taxpayers. There is nothing in this budget to suggest that we may look seriously at alternative ways of delivering services in the future. It's more of the same. There are no radical cost-saving solutions and no indication that things will change. For that reason, I'm afraid I cannot support the motion. I'm moved by the necessity to set a legal budget, although I feel we are railroaded into this position year after year, but I will therefore be abstaining on the main motion. To conclude, I do, however, find some merit in the Liberal Democrat amendments, particularly the reduction in the number of councillors, which I have supported in the past, and the condemnation of the government that has heavily relied on local authorities throughout the pandemic, but has failed miserably to support those authorities. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Allen. Councillor Peel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We cannot support this budget, and we cannot support any amendment that does not alter this budget. We cannot and we will not be part of something that is so unjust in its conception and so immoral in its delivery. We will have no part in this vicious attack on our staff and our services by this government. We will oppose these measures, not only tonight, but if passed, into the future. And we do call upon other groups to join us in voting this budget down. Madam Mayor, the excessive demand of the government on this council to remove 37 million in one fell swoop is a demand that is entirely of their own making. The official budget report before us shows total COVID costs projected into the forthcoming financial year as being around the 9 million mark. If this was the case, are we seriously saying that had COVID not happened, we wouldn't be looking at 37 million, we'd be looking at 28 million? No, we aren't saying that. And we aren't saying that because it isn't true, as total COVID costs are not being fully quantified. The first omission is the fact that in the current financial year, this council has had to use £5 million worth of reserves in order to balance this year's budget due to COVID costs. This £5 million is cash that would have been there available to cushion and spread out the cuts over a 2-year period. Secondly, the 8 million of deferred cuts from 1921 would have been partly offset by the time we had got to this stage by natural and planned growth in business rates, as advised to the last Labour Council by senior officers. These were expected business rates growth that did not happen as a result of COVID. But let's err on the side of caution and say that had the economy been functioning as normal, business rates growth would have halved the deferred 8 million to 4 million. So let's add this 4 million to the 5 million of reserves already used to balance this year's budget and add in the official COVID cost for next year of 9 million. And we come to a more realistic figure of all costs associated with this pandemic being 18 million, not 9 million. A conservative estimate that brings the real cuts figure to 19 million had we been fully funded. But why are we not looking at this figure of 19 million? Why are we instead looking at 37 million? Simple, because the government has lied to us. The government is guilty of an irresponsible dereliction of duty towards the people of Bolton. And make no mistake, it is not us who would be guilty of dereliction of duty by failing to pass this budget tonight. The cause and the blame lies entirely on their shoulders, and they should be ashamed of themselves, because they said that they would do all that they can to ensure that no council is out of pocket as a result of this crisis. They have failed to keep that promise. They are the ones who have abandoned this council and the people of this borough. Conversely, the government have quite rightly found the money to keep the economy afloat, found the money to prevent mass redundancies. And when Andy Burnham took a stance and did not support the second tiered lockdown in Greater Manchester unless new money was found to assist struggling businesses, guess what? They found the money. So the money is there. Councils such as Eastbourne, Bexley, Luton and Peterborough have found out to their delight that the money can be found. Robert Jenrick justified additional cash for these councils, citing the exceptional events of the past year. Well, I'm sure people in Bolton and elsewhere will be pleased to know that we somehow didn't suffer from the exceptional events of the past year. Now, we know that the council has asked for extra, but if this council has ever, for one moment, left the government with the impression that we weren't really in trouble and we really can cope, then they too have failed in their duty. Madam Mayor, we were asked what the Labour group's line in the sand is. What were the things that we could have attempted to take out of the budget and replace with other alternative cuts, as per an official sensible amendment or an alternative Labour budget? The simple fact of the matter is the line in the sand is the COVID inflated element totaling 18 million. That is our line in the sand. It's never been about slicing extra off this department or that to protect another. It's always been about the immoral and unjust starting point for this entire budget debate. This is our line in the sand, and it's a line that we cannot cross with good conscience. There is a much bigger argument here than simply balancing the books. There are times when responsible councillors who put the needs of our people first must take a stand and say no more. This is our stance, and we urge all other councillors to stand with us. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Peel. Councillor McMulkin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, here we are again, being made the offer that we can't refuse. Reminds me very much like the Godfather film. But it's not the Corleone family, a criminal group led by a smartly dressed, intelligent Marlon Brando. No, it's another criminal group led by a blonde-haired clown in an ill-fitting suit, the Conservative government, who have, for over a decade, under the smoke screen of ideological austerity, hacked away at public services, the welfare state and the NHS, the very safety nets that those with the narrowest shoulders to carry the burden depend upon. The worldwide financial crash of 2008 caused, let us not forget, by criminals in the banking and financial sector, none of whom were sent to prison, by the way, but were bailed out to the tune of 500 billion and enabled them to get their snouts swiftly back in the trough. The effects of those years of ideological austerity are that the gap between the rich and poor has widened. The young are now worse off than their parents were at their age. Home ownership has declined steeply. Families are stuck in lifelong and precarious private renting. And for the first time in a century, life expectancy has stopped growing, and for women in poor areas has actually fallen. We have 1.5 million frail old people who get no care at all. Child poverty has soared to its highest level since before the Second World War, and infant mortality rose for the first time in two generations. The biggest growth industry are the food banks in the 6th richest country in the world. This council has made over £190 million cuts in those years. And now, on the back of a worldwide COVID pandemic, we are presented with the offer that we can't refuse again. Make further cuts. We won't get a visit from Luca Brazzi and find an horse's head in our beds, but we'll get officials sent in to make the cuts for us. Well, if government can stump up 500 billion to bail out the banks, they can bail out local authorities and protect those services that those citizens who have been at the sharp end of over a decade of ideological austerity and have been impacted the greatest by this worldwide pandemic, and will continue to do so with the fallout from that pandemic to protect the very services that they depend on most. I know many of you have made the decision to support or amazingly abstain on this budget. Well, if you do, then please don't tell us you do it with a heavy heart, or that you're legally obliged to own this budget, but own the consequences of it as well, because in doing so, you're complicit in the ever-growing queue at the food banks, the pensioner isolated and alone, and the child who is vulnerable, going to bed hungry, who will wake up tomorrow wondering what that day will be like. It is morally bankrupt and grotesque. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "An individual who breaks a law that conscience tells him is unjust. To arouse the conscience of the community over its injustice is in reality expressing the highest respect for the law." Me and my colleagues will be opposing this budget. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McMulkin. Councillor Galloway.
Am I on? Yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council. It is one of the key themes of the Bolton 2030 vision that children should have the best start in life and that they should all be given the opportunity to reach their full potential. That ambition is at the heart of the Children's Directorate, and it is one that we as the Conservative administration have tried to keep. In the past couple of years, effective demand management strategies have been put in place to manage the many pressures facing children's services whilst working with reduced resources. This is allowing the Directorate to make significant financial savings and are often at the same time providing better outcomes, which of course is the holy grail for any public service. We are proposing to save £9 million out of a budget of around 50 million, which is incredibly challenging, especially in the light of the pandemic. I will outline some of the ways in which we are proposing to do this. The Early Help Service launched last year is the key priority for the Council. By identifying a need for intervention with children at possible risk at the earliest opportunity, in the family, in the community, at school, and working on preventative strategies, it reduces the escalation of cases, which would involve needing services which are far more costly and also involve more damaging solutions for the children. It involves close, coordinated work with all the partner agencies. The police, schools, health and voluntary agencies all have a key role to play in helping and reducing the demand on statutory council services. The biggest budget pressure in children's and the main area for savings is in placement costs for our looked after children. Much work has already gone into reducing the number of looked after children in out of borough placements, which can cost nearly £250,000 per child per annum, and also those in independent fostering agency placements, which are double the cost of in-house foster care. We are bringing children back into the borough to be cared for and increasing the use of in-house foster care. Whilst it is clearly financially preferable for our looked after children to be in our borough, it is more importantly often the best option for the children themselves, as it promotes family and friendship group contact, allowing a consistency of education and can lead to a smoother transition to adulthood. Obviously, there are cases where specialist out-of-borough placements are the only option to meet the complex needs of some children. We are making sure that the health elements of these placements are funded through the NHS. Savings are being made by encouraging a transition to semi-independent living for our looked after young people. Again, this strategy reduces costs, but can be beneficial for the young person involved. A sudden change from being looked after to complete independence can be daunting. We now have a project with Bolton at Home, who are supplying tenancies for this semi-independent living for 6 of our young people. And for example, we have twins who are teenagers. They are both in separate out-of-borough placements in Yorkshire at a cost of £5,500 a week each, a total of over £500,000 a year. They had long voiced a desire to return to Bolton and live together, and they have become part of the Bolton at Home scheme, and they're about to move back here to a supported tenancy at £400 a week each. The other main financial pressure is social work staffing. As well as managed demand, our budget savings in the borough include a further reduction of agency staff in favour of permanent social workers who are half the cost. It provides consistency and continuity of approach in our casework. It is an incredibly competitive field to recruit and retain experienced social workers. Other local authorities offer more money than we do, and so the strategy in Bolton is to make our offer as attractive as possible by ensuring better career progression, intensive support by senior leaders, and a good partnership working at Castle Hill. The impressive children's corporate team, led by Bernie Brown, have had the foresight and clear-sighted judgment to set and train all these strategies, which will help us to achieve savings whilst ensuring that vulnerable children are looked after and none slip through the net. It will be incredibly challenging, especially with the pandemic, but the groundwork has been set and we are already seeing results from our efforts. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Galloway. Next one to speak is Councillor Zaman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I think every member of this council understands that the proposal to cut local authority budget by £35 million in 1 year is beginning of the end of local government in Bolton as we see it today, and we must not be in any doubt about this. It is estimated that before COVID-19 struck, local authorities had already lost 60% of core government funding as a result of Tory austerity. Now, with this backdrop at the beginning of the pandemic, the councils across the country had to do lots of things to support their communities, whether that was provision of food, of services, care centres, bringing homeless people in, really important stuff. And the council were told by this Tory government, and I quote, "We will stand by you. We will support you. You get on and do what you need to do." So they did. Now, the councils are being told when they're facing bankruptcy and cutting back services, which is the last thing that anybody wants to do, that the central government cannot do anything. The government is just standing by this unfolding crisis and is doing absolutely nothing. This attitude from central government, in fact, is sickening. Instead of helping us, this government has given us a choice between cutting core services or face bankruptcy. Is this how you should govern? Well, clearly not. Councillor Greenarch, the key question is, what has your Tory government done or is doing to help the people of Bolton in relation to this crisis in local government unfolding in front of our eyes? And the simple answer to this question is nothing, absolutely nothing. And you know this is the case. Let us all be very clear on this. If this budget is implemented, it will ultimately damage local services, harm communities, and drive up poverty. Is this what you call levelling up? In fact, what the government is doing is plainly immoral, irresponsible, and unjust. I will not support this budget. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Zaman. Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members. I try not to repeat a lot of what I've already been said, but unfortunately I probably will be repeating some of it. Anyway, I think it's important to give context to this proposal of the budget in terms of the last 10 years. Yeah, they are in the past, but they are very relevant to what we're dealing with today. We were told a decade ago that, through government confidence, that they could eliminate the deficit within 5 years. So that was the first deadline they missed. And then we go on to, fast forward into today and the COVID crisis and the way they've handled that. And to me, this goes to demonstrate how incompetent this government is. That then translates and drilled down to the local Conservative group. again, when we talk about balancing a budget, it's not the be all and end all to balance the budget completely. There has to be a reasonable timescale to pay funding back. If you look what happened during the war, it was decades and decades to pay the war debt back. I see no reason why we can't get into that scenario. So, you know, in terms of an ideological tool that's been used by the government of austerity, that's the vehicle they've currently used to suppress what is going on. We find ourselves now in a position where mixed government's messages yet again, they're saying if we don't pass this budget tonight, there seems to be a serious threat of commissioners coming in and overriding this authority, telling us what to do and how to do it. Well, you know, I've lived a lifetime of under threat. So, you know, this is more kind of bluster. I think the term blowhards have been used tonight. But in terms of the mixed messaging, wear a mask, don't wear a mask, eat out to help out. And now after 11 months, oh, hang on, we might be needed to quarantine at the airport. You know, so are we expected to support a government drilled down by a local Conservative-led coalition that they actually know what they're doing? Because I'm not convinced they do. You know, this town, this borough is suffering dramatically. The idea that you cut and cut and cut to the bone and that's going to resolve something, it certainly isn't. I would say to the local Conservative group, back to the drawing board for you lot. Get back to your ministers, speak to them and pose a message on that we need additional funding. It's no good just keep cutting and taking services away. The people of this borough have suffered enough. Enough is enough. And I agree totally with Councillor Peel. There's a line in the sand and this is as far as we're going. We are not prepared to cross that threshold. So you can make as many threats as you want about bringing commissioners in. It's falling on deaf ears. It's certainly, I won't be supporting this budget. And I'd just like to make a final reference point to, I was quite impressed by what Councillor Newall said. That was quite a rousing speech there. And I hope you are going to vote against this budget and not sit on the fence and abstain. So without more ado, I think I agree. This is totally immoral and totally unjust, and we should not be putting up with it. And I would urge members to vote against it. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor McKeon.
Madam Mayor and members of the Council, when George Osborne introduced his first budget in 2010, the then head of the Institute for Fiscal Studies described it as, and I'm quoting, the beginning of the longest, deepest cuts to public services since the Second World War. And tonight we're dealing with its consequences. Osborne's act fell on the weakest, poorest and sickest, and those councils who represented them. Labour councils bore the brunt, with Liverpool suffering the most. Councils in aggregate have suffered a 40% drop in income. Everyone on this call at this meeting is well aware of this, and to his credit, Councillor Greenhouse has often commented on the disproportionate effects cuts have had on this council. For 10 years, the Labour group struggled to cope with government cuts, all the time trying to protect the most vulnerable. But enough is enough. The time has come to say to government that we will not impose an immoral, irresponsible and unnecessary budget on the people of Bolton. The immorality of the proposed budget is clear. At least £18 million of the proposed cuts are the results of the COVID pandemic, either unexpected expenditure or income lost. The government promised to compensate local authorities for the costs incurred by councils in fighting the pandemic. They owe us £18 million. Immoral too is the threat that this budget of redundancies. We've rightly praised our workforce during the year-long pandemic for the outstanding work they've done for our community. For weeks, we went out onto the streets to clap in appreciation. And even today, there was a press release from our press office commending the work of social care staff. Is our thanks to be expressed in presenting a P45? The proposed budget is also irresponsible. The Prime Minister has talked of building back better after COVID. He's also said there's no going back to the austerity of the past 10 years. One of the revelations of the pandemic has been the vital role councils have been playing in supporting communities. They could have played an even more effective role in such areas as track and trace had they been given the resources and responsibility. When the pandemic is over, this council will play a crucial part in rebuilding the community and the economy. How can a council weakened by swinging cuts be expected to do this? We see the psychological and emotional damage suffered by individuals and groups. It's too soon to estimate the demands that may be put on adult and children's services. What shocks me most about the proposed budget is the extent of the cuts to adult and children's services. Surely we can't stand by and let this happen without a fight. And it's not necessary to pass this budget. Eastbourne, Bexley, Luton, Peterborough have told government they need help and they've received it. Apparently Luton needs help because of the loss of income from Luton Airport. What about our loss of income from Manchester Airport? Yesterday, the IFS issued a report on the economy, arguing that it's not the right time to be raising taxes. The government fears raising taxes nationally, but expects councils to do it via the council tax. More immorality and dishonesty. Interest rates have never been as low, currently 0.1%. If they had the will, the Tory government could fill the financial hole that this and other councils are facing. It isn't that they can't do it, they don't want to do it. Tonight's a moment of truth for all of us, particularly I would say for the minority parties. And after Councillor Newall's fantastic speech, how can the Liberals sit on the fence? How principled is that as a stand? The minority parties join the Conservatives in alliance. Well, they've now got to consider the implications of that. My colleagues from Horwich are involved in the alliance. What implications are there for Horwich of cuts? Are the Horwich First and Blackrod councillors prepared to run the risk that our library might be affected, that the services of the Brasley Daycare Centre might be affected? There comes a point when we must stand up and reject the ideological drive on the part of government to weaken local authorities. Now is that time. I will be voting, along with my colleagues, against the administration's proposed budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McKeon. Councillor Muslim.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. While we debate tonight about the circumstances we find ourselves in and the difficult choices we have had to make, it is worth thinking about the choices that other politicians have had to make and what reasons they had for doing so. And I, in this matter, refer to our Labour leader in waiting, Greater Manchester Mayor Andy Burnham. For it is he who has sought to increase the tax of the residents of Bolton and the other 9 boroughs of Greater Manchester without due care and attention. Mayor Burnham's precept was originally focused on the maximum he could grab from residents of Greater Manchester, knowing the Labour Politburo of the Police, Fire and Crime Panel would wave it through. The original proposal was a shocking increase of 7.2% for the ordinary man and woman in Bolton. However, for reasons only referred to at the start of the panel as in response to the consultation, something for which we were not cited for in advance, the Mayor had to retreat a little with his tail between his legs and propose a mere 4.8% increase instead. This amount at a time when police funding from central government is seeing a rise in Greater Manchester to £636 million, which is a near £20 million increase, is shocking. Not only to mention that Andy Burnham, as Police and Crime Commissioner, has presided over year-on-year decline of GMP effectiveness throughout senior levels, resulting in it being only the second force in history to enter special measures, is truly astounding. Residents should not have been made to directly increase funding for an organisation that at senior levels can't get its house in order. But here's the rub. I finally got hold of the consultation results following the meeting and vote, where I was the only elected official in Greater Manchester to vote against the increase. The results showed that out of the 502 responses, which equates to 0.02% of the 2.8 million residents of Greater Manchester, 61.5% of those consulted in the conurbation did not support an increase, and in fact 31.5% thought it should be lowered. Yet the infallible King of the North defied them anyway, because as ever, he takes it all for granted. But on the contrary, we as an administration take nothing for granted. We have always worked openly, transparently and inclusively with all parties on many areas of council matters, whether through specific policy proposals or offering personal briefings with each group or independent member on the budget. Our door has always been open to conversations that focus on improving the lives of the residents of Bolton. Yet it is unfortunate we don't see this attitude from Andy Burnham and his Labour colleagues. These past 2 years have seen a culture change in Bolton. A culture where residents can have faith that despite division and pandemics, we can deliver on our promises of fairer funding, of record investment in roads and pavements, providing £1 million for cleaner and greener initiatives, as well as ending backroom deals and favouritism. We have a record of achievement and are proud of it. And yes, this has been an extremely difficult year for individuals, for businesses, as well as local authorities. But for the good of Bolton and the surrounding towns of Farnworth, Kersley, Little Lever and Darcy Lever, Horwich, Blackrod and West Horton, we must pass a budget that still sees over 60% of its finance protecting the most vulnerable in our borough and will not see us have government appointed commissioners running the shop. I therefore urge every member of this council to keep faith with the people of the borough of Bolton and do what is right and not block this budget. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Muslim. Councillor Abdullah.
I've not got the red box. Oh, thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor, respected members. Councillor Greenhalgh, as you've probably figured out by now, Labour members will not be supporting your proposed £37 million worth of Conservative cuts to vital services, and neither should members from all opposition parties and the independents. None of us should even be considering abstaining. We've been elected to govern and look after the best interests of the people of Bolton. We should all make a stance by standing together against these vicious cuts. Cuts of £37 million to the people of Bolton is in no way acceptable. Councillor Greenhalgh and Mr Oakman, having already visited number 10 back in October 2019 and being quoted in the Bolton News as banging the drum for Bolton when pitching to investors, well, now is the time for you to bang the drum for the people of Bolton. This time, the Prime Minister and the Conservative government needs to listen. They need to listen hard that the people of Bolton will not accept £37 million worth of Conservative cuts during these unprecedented and extremely difficult times. Residents have lost jobs, businesses have folded, and just as the Prime Minister has assisted other councils from slashing vital services, he needs to listen and do the same for the residents of Bolton. It's unjust and a failure of duty for the government to neglect Bolton. I have high regard and respect for you, Councillor Greenhalgh, but for you wanting to implement these massive cuts is disappointing to say the least. My fellow Labour members and I will have no part in this budget. I urge all opposition party members and independents to stand strong against this immoral Conservative leadership for the people of Bolton. I urge you all not to sit on the fence and abstain, but to stand with us and vote against the Conservative budget proposals. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Abdullah. Councillor Saunders.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the Council. As members have already said, none of us should underestimate the importance of tonight's meeting in the history of this borough, the potential impact on all those associated with our council and all of our residents. This budget is horrific. 37 million cuts to be made in just 2 years is gut-wrenching. As Executive Cabinet members have started to explain, statutory people services will be protected for the most vulnerable, but wider cuts are devastating to contemplate, and I predict that the authority, partnership organisations and councillors will be assisting residents with the fallout of these cuts for years to come. It's true, our borough has been dealt an incredibly bad hand. A COVID-19 impacts on revenue of almost 10 million, 8 million deferred legacy cuts, and further pressures of almost 20 million. The government did say that no council would be worse off because of COVID, but that promise has shamefully been broken, and the government have simply discarded Bolton Borough to one side. It's clear, however, that whoever was the administration at this time, whether that be Labour, Conservative or Monster Raven Looney Party, they would have to face up to these cuts. I want to echo what has been said by members previously in the debate, that pre-budget consultation this year has been open and inclusive. All parties and members who have wanted to engage have been able to do so. No alternative budgets have come forward by any opposition party. Cross-party conversations have already been positive and budget options have already been removed from the cuts. One example in my ward of Farnworth is Farnworth Children's Centre, which has been saved and will not be shut down. This meeting is understandably very passionate and noisy with emotion. It's important that residents of the borough should know exactly what the 56 councillors can determine tonight with their vote. Councillors cannot stop these cuts, however much we all desperately want to and however much we despise the government. But councillors tonight can choose who manages these cuts. We can decide whether it is us, sensitively with local knowledge on the priorities of the people of the borough, or we can simply hand the keys over to the commissioners from government to come in and cut what they determine to be the priorities for our residents. However, if councillors vote against the budget tonight and decide to put their faith in central government to do our job, I frankly don't think the government deserve that role. Nor am I convinced that they will play ball, have a change of heart, or help us in terms of any more money. I simply don't trust them with our finances. In reality, the government officials would likely tell us to take out loans as they have other authorities and would put potentially our capital budget at risk, such as the regeneration programme. Regeneration has been a key part of council's recent political agenda, with many social impacts benefiting from that, especially in Farnworth and Kersley schemes. I worry that financially indecisive council could potentially put all that hard work at risk and potentially damage private investors' confidence in Bolton Council as a partner. As other members have expressed, a massive overhaul of our local government is urgently needed. Bolton Council not setting a legal budget tonight may write a couple of headlines in the newspapers tomorrow morning, but in reality this monumental challenge needs all local authorities, unions, political parties and every councillor to lobby for a better deal for local councils. All councillors have expressed all councillors will have received many letters of concerns from unions, individuals, and of course our partner organisations. Many have expressed concerns about the vagueness of the budget. The important thing that we've got to remember is that if we vote against this budget tonight, we lose the ability to scrutinise and to go through the political and democratic processes. Voting against means that there's no democratic process and councillors sit idly by. We must remind ourselves of the Constitution, which does say that we have a collective duty to carry out management functions. We should be involved in decision making and we must take advice provided to us by the Council's Chief Finance Officer. I represent Farnworth and Kersley First Party and it would be easy for me to say, screw the Constitution, sod the officer advice, what would look better on my election leaflet, but this evening we've got to rise above party politics. However individual councillors determine what their personal sense of responsibility is tonight, vote that way, but don't sit on your hands. I think Councillor Reslops and Councillor Hayes' amendments are very good. In particular, Councillor Reslops, I think has brought forward an excellent localist proposal, which if used in the fair and proper manner by members could have a real benefit for the respective ward of that member. But yeah, do the right thing tonight, councillors, and vote. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sanders. Councillor Haslam.
Madam Mayor, this is a budget that no one wanted to present. It is a unique set of circumstances which has made it necessary. In the past few years, this council has been able to buttress the savings required by the use of the reserves. This year, this option is no longer available. So the difficulty in making a legal budget is more severe. We fully realise that we're a minority administration. We can't get this budget through by ourselves. No administration and certainly no leader could have done more to include everyone. All groups and all councillors have been contacted and consulted at every stage for their views and their input into the budget. And wherever possible, their views have been accommodated. We have been inclusive, open and transparent. This is a non-political budget dealing with the situation that this council finds itself in. We've acted in a responsible way for the good of Bolton. This council has a duty, a legal duty, to pass a budget. Clearly, each councillor must make their own decision and must act within their own conscience. If this council refuses to pass a legal budget, it would be a dereliction of the duty placed on us by the people of Bolton. I urge each and every councillor to consider the implications very seriously. The possibility of a Section 114 would have ramifications for the whole life and economy of this town and its residents. And it won't be the rich and comfortable who will suffer. It'll be the vulnerable and those living in areas of deprivation and straitened circumstances who rely on the council services. It is they who will suffer. These are the people for whom we in all parties here to represent. This administration undertakes these responsibilities passionately and purposefully, as councillors Morgan and Galloway have so eloquently demonstrated their work for the disadvantaged and the vulnerable. Turning briefly to my own area of responsibility, we have preserved the vast majority of the school crossing patrol budget. This is not a statutory service, something we don't have to legally provide, but road safety, especially of our children, is a clear priority. The highways budget will be taking a hit, but if we look at highways as a whole, in the 21 months of this administration, great strides forward have been made with the injection of a further £10 million of capital investment, meaning that in total an extra £600,000 for each and every ward in Bolton has been spent repairing residential roads and pavements. This is because of the import we attach to the roads in this borough. The Highways Department have been very successful in the pandemic of negotiating some very good deals, with the result that not only have the renewals been done efficiently with minimal interruption, but more importantly, we've been able to renew many more roads than anticipated. This has benefited each and every ward in Bolton, completely fairly in equal shares, which has been the hallmark of this administration. We have embarked on the regeneration of our borough, aimed at the future of our town and the towns and the vibrancy of its economy. All parts of this borough are included, and it's a huge task to link together all the various stakeholders and investments in the combined effort. If this budget is not passed, it could present a huge question mark to those investors who are putting their money into Bolton. The whole regeneration agenda will be jeopardised by such a decision. We on this side recognise the impact of increased council tax will have on the household budgets of residents. We fully realise the difficulty many residents will have in finding the money. This is not an easy decision. 3.85% in total and 1.3% in the budget excluding social care is a sizable item. But the 1.3% is much less than the amount we could have raised without requirement for a referendum. And when this is taken into account with the zero increase last year, it is a considerable achievement and does mean that we have kept faith with the council taxpayers of Bolton. We have done this while maintaining the life and services which this town rightly demands and expects. I urge council to support this budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haslam. Councillor Brady.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, councillors. As elected councillors, we all know the financial position and how it's arisen. Every councillor has had the opportunity to consider and review the proposals and options, and every councillor has also had the opportunity to remove and replace with alternatives. This budget is a result of consistent and persistent underfunding of local authorities by this and every previous government, by reserves depleted to the extent a warning was given in 2018, by a lack of income due to COVID, and by the expected future costs of COVID. Despite promises given by government that no council will be left out of pocket in dealing with the effects of COVID, that inadequate funding for adult social care would be addressed, and the levelling up of the north-south divide, Bolton is yet to see any of those promises kept. With the legal requirements to set a budget, voting against it and inviting government-appointed people to come in and administer those very same cuts, for me, would send a clear message to government, residents and private investors that councillors are willing to sacrifice their responsibility and to their electorate and to abandon their democratic rights. For councillors abstaining, what will that abstention achieve apart from splinters in the backside from sitting on the fence? Bolton needs private investors to have confidence in us. We need the jobs, the housing and the future employment. Bolton Council must show those investors we are a united and competent council who have confidence in our borough and are not a basket case. Tonight we consider the budget for the coming year. The major opposition party have not presented an alternative budget, therefore we must decide on the budget and amendments before us. Listening to the speeches made tonight, Councillor Allen makes some very valid points about the responsibility to get the best value for delivering services. Going forward, we have to do this. However, it's the points made by Councillor Peel that beg the question. Why did he not bring these points forward earlier and allow those to be considered and even implemented instead of waiting until tonight? It smacks of point scoring rather than a genuine desire to lessen the effect on the people of Bolton. Councillor McKeon asked, have HBFI considered how our residents in Norwich and Blackroad will be affected? I can assure him we have, and we've also ensured that our libraries and Bradley Day Centre will remain open. We have little else left. And also our two town councils will continue to support and increase that support when needed for our residents. Considering the amendments, I support Councillor Heslop's amendment. However, we would want to see assurances that these personal decisions could not be used for personal or political gain or to disadvantage councillors who are unable to forgo their allowance. I also support Councillor Hayes' amendment, and I do not support Councillor Wilkinson's amendment. Councillors were invited to make representation to the Local Government Boundary Commission review of council size, not for those representations to be judged and decided by Councillor Wilkinson, who's obviously no idea of the issues Norwich and Blackroad are facing. Thanks, Madam Mayor. Thanks, councillors, for listening.
Thank you, Councillor Brady. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council. I'd first like to talk about the amendment regarding the reductions in councillors because services have been moved out of the council. Councillor Heslop made a very good point that in Bolton, each councillor has around 14,000 constituents to support. And because of house building, which we know, especially here in the West, is massive, which brings in even more residents into the town. So I can see why Councillor Heslop has looked at an increase. Councillor Wilkinson, however, is right. Services have moved away from the council. However, the role of the councillor has not diminished. For example, housing, yes, is at Bolton at Home, or maybe another social housing landlord, or a child is having issues at school. We as councillors are still asked and have a duty and care and responsibility to the residents to help, which we all do. So technically, our roles have not diminished, they have increased. It actually costs each resident £2.36 per councillor a year, which equates to 5 pence a week from the taxpayers' budget. Many people tonight have spoken passionately and eloquently about the unfair and unjust funding of local government. And I really don't think anybody at all in this virtual room would disagree with that. Nobody wants cuts, but we have to set a balanced budget. Even Labour have quoted, and I will quote, councillors are asked to take all actions necessary to bring the budget back into balance. Failure to set a balanced budget can lead to action against councillors under a code of conduct and a judicial review, and more significantly, intervention by the Secretary of State. And that's a quote from the Labour Party. One of the other things I'd like to say, we do need to save money. We do need to claw back some of this money. And for me, one of the massive areas is the amount of money we pay as a local authority to GMCA. And what do we actually get back? Not a great deal. This is something that seriously needs looking at. They are sat on millions of pounds of our money and money from the other boroughs within GMCA. And they're sat there when we and every other authority is suffering and has not got enough funding. So I would like to say, let's Megxit. Let's get out of GMCA, because I'm sure we can do a damn better job ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. Councillor Flitcroft.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the Council. Well, what a 12 months that has been. Here we are again on budget night. As we know, we are bound by law to set a legal budget, or it will be set for us. This is the most important role we have as elected members. I know that I, for one, would much prefer us as a council to be in control of these savings rather than a faceless suit from London, who would not give a damn about saving jobs and services wherever possible, or protecting investment in our town centres regeneration schemes that we've worked so hard for. Their cuts will be cold-hearted, lacking emotion, without local knowledge or understanding. The lack of any comprehensive amendment or alternative budget for many other groups speaks volumes to me. Everyone knows approving this budget is the right thing to do, but how many will do the right thing? The dutiful thing. Doing the right thing is not always easy, does not always boost your popularity. I urge everyone here tonight, put party point scoring to one side. Stop writing your election leaflets with this no-win situation we find ourselves in. Difficult decisions have to be made. Doing the right thing now does not stop councillors lobbying for further government funding. It is possible to do both. These savings must be made. The question to answer tonight is by who? That is your choice. Let's have Bolton councillors making the difficult decisions, not some stranger. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Flitcroft. Councillor Donaghy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the Council. I think, first of all, I'll make my position clear. I will not be supporting this budget, nor will I be supporting any of the amendments, as none of the amendments significantly alter the substantive proposition. None of them. I mean, Councillor Hayes's motion says everything, and yet it says nothing. You know, Roger, Gladstone would have been ashamed of you. He wasn't backward about coming forward. He would have said what needed to be done. And the strongest thing we can do is to vote against this budget, join with others from whatever political persuasion or none, in a proper delegation to London, and demand the additional funds we need or the flexibility we have already suggested to deal with this current issue. Councillor Greenhalgh, well, I have a great deal of sympathy for him. He was painful tonight in his delivery, and it was genuine pain. He was prayerful and he was pleading. But we have to ask this. Has he done his best? Have our two Tory MPs done their best to support him and to try and persuade this government to offer Bolton the support it needs? Now, if the answer is yes, then they've let us down, and we have been treated, quite frankly, in a very shabby manner by the government. Or even worse, we have been ignored by the government. A government that was going to level up, a government that was going to thank the North for voting Tory, a government that was going to stand by the North. Well, I'll tell you what, mate, if this is standing by the North, we don't need enemies like the government. We need to oppose this budget. And Councillor Cox has said we don't want direct intervention in our borough from the government. The people don't want it, and no councillor certainly wants that. And that's true. But what the people do want is the government to properly fund this council and give us a fighting chance, or at least give us the flexibility to deal with this issue, as we have already suggested. That's what the people want. Councillor Muslim talks about keeping faith with the people of Bolton. And you know, he could have just been reading a script straight out of Tory Central News like any other Tory hack. The way I would suggest, Councillor Muslim, we keep faith with the people of Bolton is to join together, oppose this budget, ask for the funds that we need, and go to London and get that support down there in London, which I believe has not been done yet on a cross-party basis. And when we've done that, and when we're rejected or hopefully supported, then we can start talking about the position that the council finds itself in. Oh, and incidentally, the gloom and doom merchants who were talking about the commissioners. Well, I don't know what commissioners would do. I have seen authorities where commissioners have gone in to run individual facets of the services, but not run a full council. I don't know what the commissioners would do. And quite frankly, that is a red herring at this stage. So I say again to all members, if you can look one of our council employees who has given their all during this pandemic and now faces redundancy, and if you can look the elderly and those in children's services whose finance is about to be decimated, if you can look them in the face tomorrow morning, then vote for this budget. But I suspect you can't, because you couldn't lie easy in your bed if you voted for this budget. So let's take this problem to London and put maximum pressure where it should be applied to the government and ask them to support the people of Bolton. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the council.
Thank you, Councillor Donaghy. Councillor Baines.
Just wait for the minute. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, fellow councillors. It's not going to come to anyone's surprise tonight that the public health team have had to shoulder immense challenges over this coming year. And as Councillor Morgan referred to earlier in the debate about the challenges, but also the achievements within his portfolio, I too wish to look at some of these. And firstly, I want to actually say I'm absolutely proud of what our public health team, under the direction of Dr. Helen Lowy and her team of officers, have achieved under immensely difficult circumstances this year. She has led the team during one of, if not the most challenging years in our history. We, however, have still been able to discharge our duties in relation to the provision of statutory, commissioned and non-commissioned services. For example, sexual health, contraceptive services, substance misuse, HIV sampling and primary nursing, amongst many others. But this has been a great challenge against this backdrop of a global, national and local pandemic. We have had to be innovative, but this is against also a backdrop of Labour decisions made for us and affecting us by the various Labour quangos at GM. We've only had to make minimal savings this year. We've done our best to do this, and we've done it in order to protect our residents' health. As without public health funding, there will be no residents' health. It's a priority. We have been able to develop a JSNA, which will allow us to undertake deep dives into the salient issues in need of the most contemporary evidence in order to help focus our services for the future. We have also been able to undertake a public health restructuring exercise, and this will only serve to strengthen the work of public health going forward, and so work to meet the Marmot principles and the recommendations to help inequalities. We've now got a health board, an ageist board, a mental health board, a children's board. We've got the various and the right people around the table, all feeding in to our active, connected and prosperous board. We are strengthening our partnerships across health and care and integrating our services more and more and streamlining those services to be more effective than they've ever been in the past. We have commissioned the ACES study to identify specific needs of vulnerable children and young people across the borough, and also the services they need. This is so very much more that we need to do, addressing obesity, for example, through the Healthy Weights initiative, as obesity, as we all know, is so closely linked to ill health, and especially for being at risk of succumbing to COVID and the ensuing mortality and morbidity that goes along with this. We have managed all of these things this year, as well as the test and the trace service and identifying and managing local outbreaks with the help of the various government funds. It's testament to this administration and its commitment to public health that for the first time in a very long time, we now have a robust funded plan for the future of our residents' health and well-being, as public health is central to everything. Without health, nothing can be achieved. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Baines. Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, I'm saddened this evening. Saddened on a number of fronts. Saddened, yes, that we have a difficult budget decision to make, that we have before us some horrendous cuts that none of us would have wished to see, but which circumstances, the perfect storm was mentioned by one colleague earlier, the perfect storm was brought together. But I'm more saddened because I thought that we had in Bolton a mature council which faced up to the pragmatic and practical needs of the borough, not a council in which the Labour group is abdicating its responsibility by seeking to deflect a hypothetical case that if we do not set a budget tonight, the risk of commissioners being appointed doesn't exist. But if we don't set a budget tonight, the government will suddenly produce the magic money tree, as it were, Bolton's benefit. The fact of the matter is that Councillor Howard started it off by denying she was in the real world and by becoming hypothetical in her assumptions to what might happen. The simple fact is that if this council doesn't have a budget, if the budget is not balanced, the Deputy Chief Executive, Borough Treasurer, has got a statutory duty to report a Section 114 failure to meet its budget obligations. And when I hear Councillor Peel with his support for Councillor, when I hear Councillor Evans talking about a veiled threat that doesn't exist, I'm sorry to say that those members clearly are not prepared to tell the public of Bolton the true facts. We have a situation brought about by a whole series of factors beyond the control of this council, I do accept. But we've also got a series of factors which should not be overlooked lightly. Portfolio member after portfolio member tonight has pointed out some of the huge progress that's been made. Additional £10 million on repairing roads, increased support for the voluntary sector, the school meals service, holiday meals, the reform of services across children's services, and the enormous capital funding that's come in through the Towns Fund and other funds for the benefit of the whole of this borough and the townships around the borough. Compare that, Madam Mayor, to Labour Party, which over the last few months has seemed to want to stoke up the perfect storm by opposing policies which the Labour Party themselves had promoted. The reconfiguration of the Meals on Wheels service, the revision of the provision of nursery education, all to me now very clear evidence Labour Party's policy, not able to put forward an alternative budget, bankrupt of ideas, bankrupt of plans and proposals, bankrupt of alternatives, merely wanted to stifle and prevent a sensible and constructive discussion and debate on the budget. I've got to say that I thought Councillor Flitcroft summed it up absolutely correctly when she said that we have a duty, and it is right as members of the council to face up to that duty and to approve a legal budget. Tough as that is, difficult as that is, the problems it will cause, whilst at the same time lobbying for a further support and an improvement of our position as a borough. I think Councillor Sanders was absolutely right in his assessment that setting a legal budget is the least worst option before this council tonight. Difficult as it is, tough as those decisions are, difficult it will be to speak publicly. And I've got to say, I finally wanted to welcome Councillor Waters' suggestion. Going back to 1985, there were those of us who were around then who didn't feel that Bolton being part of what was then the Greater Manchester Combined Authority was appropriate. And certainly some of the ways it's gone forward don't gain support, and certainly not my support. So I urge members to act sensibly, to recognise it's difficult, but to support the budget in order to ensure that councillors who can promote Bolton's interests, to ensure that we maintain the maximum capital investment for externally, private and public, whilst showing that we act sensibly, collaboratively, and are willing to do the right thing. I urge members to support the budget, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Councillor Sylvester.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. As the shadow spokesperson for housing and strategic planning, I have to say that I am completely shocked at the recommendation from Cabinet to this council in the budget report at the cut to planning enforcement. This is a necessary service, and we only need to look at some high-profile planning enforcement cases in the borough to realise that it is a necessary service of the council. To cut back planning enforcement would give a carte blanche green light to anyone in the borough to do what they like in terms of planning, doing things which they should not and do not have planning permission for, safe in the knowledge that they are likely to get away with it and that it will not be investigated. We also see a big cut to building control as well in this budget. Surely too, we need our officers to be undertaking these checks to make sure that buildings are safe and to design. Once the word gets out that Bolton's Tory Council has gone soft on planning in this budget, if it is approved, then all ward councillors will end up with numerous complaints with little that can be done, if anything. Madam Mayor, did you hear what I was saying previously?
We heard most of it, just the last couple of sentences we didn't hear.
Thank you. We also see a big cut to building control as well in this budget. Surely too, we need our officers to be undertaking these checks to make sure that buildings are safe and to design. Once the word gets out that Bolton's Tory Council has gone soft on planning, if this budget is approved, then all ward councillors will end up with numerous complaints with little that can be done, if anything. If councillors are happy for this to occur and for planning enforcement and building control to be cut back and even go altogether, then you will have no problem in voting for this budget. If councillors believe that planning enforcement and building control should not be cut back in this budget, then vote against it. That is what I will be doing, Madam Mayor, and I hope that all councillors will vote against this budget, and I hope that all councillors value the work which our planning enforcement and building control officers are undertaking. Last summer, officers of this council were warned about the threat to inward investments into this town, and Labour councillors cannot be blamed for voting against this budget if that inward investment does not occur. And Labour cannot support any of the amendments tonight, as it leaves the 35 million of cuts in place in the substantive motion. So the Labour group will not be voting for any of the amendments for this reason. It leaves the 35 million of cuts still in the substantive motion. This budget in general is absolutely shocking, so I will not be supporting it at all, and I say no to the 35 million of cuts to Bolton Council services. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Sylvester. Councillor Hewitt.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of the Council. This administration has taken a pragmatic, careful and cautious approach to this budget. Within strategic housing and planning, we have remodelled the disabled facilities grant awards, raising non-means tested awards, and increased the discretionary award amount to make it easier to award to those most in need of funds, while seeking to combine budgets across different departments to streamline care services provision and therefore try to alleviate caseloads and waiting times and costs for this work while accessing central government funds. We'll bring forward revenue raising opportunities to allow better access to the planning process, modelled on the approach of others, and ensure strong enforcement. We have worked on a strategic asset management plan where there was none before. Consider that, Madam Mayor. We inherited a situation where a multi-million-pound organisation had no comprehensive information on the control of assets and associated costs held by this council. We have changed that to try and ensure we get better value for our money and ensure that those services who need it most benefit most from the assets this council owns. We've done this in consultation and partnership with others. We have worked with officers at all levels and partners across the chamber to bring forward a budget for consideration which both meets legal requirements and officer expectations around provision of services. To pass a budget through this chamber which gives surety to our customers and service users, security to our staff and reassurance to potential future investors in our borough, that Bolton is a place that can do business. It falls on this chamber to lead by example, take responsibility and pass a budget we can do business with and not allow rule by unelected Whitehall bureaucrats. What we've not seen in any of the many deliberations in the run-up to tonight, no responsibility taken, no demands made, no attempts at discussion sought from the chief opposition party. There's been a vacuous silence, an almost abdication of responsibility. Opposition within this country holds a basic responsibility, a sacred charge to be an alternative. We have seen no evidence of this and must deduce from this that they do not want, seek or desire to hold that responsibility. Councillor Howard speaks of a duty. I ask, where was the councillor's amendment? Where was the opposition budget to show that duty and responsibility? Madam Mayor, obstructionism is not opposition. There's been talk of esoteric French philosophers and ideology by certain councillors, even talk of marching on London. This administration's only belief is in the pragmatism of ensuring good local services for the lowest cost to the people who have to pay for them, given the political constraints placed upon us. I didn't count how many times the word Tory was used as an epithet, but I would suggest that speaks more to the use of ideology to justify beliefs. This talk doesn't really contribute to a feasible budget. Madam Mayor, let me finally thank staff within the department who have worked through increasing demand on their services during these times, and once again for the superb response given by staff to give financial aid to those most in need during the response to the various incidents of the past years and the professionalism of their response. I urge members of this chamber to support this budget.
Thank you, Councillor Hewitt. Councillor Fairclough.
Red line. I can't. Oh, I'm there. Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor. I will keep this very brief. A lot of things have been said. Unfortunately, I am really disappointed with Labour, and I don't always say that. I mean, I think over the years we've tried to get on, and I have had a great deal of respect for you on occasions, but tonight isn't one of them, I'm afraid. It smacks of political opportunism. Labour have put nothing forward. They've just sniped from the sidelines. Only tonight we have the mention of the issues about planning enforcement and building control. To my knowledge, this has never been put forward in any of the meetings that have been afforded to each of the parties. We have never been shy about going or indeed criticising our government. I think that is on record. And passing this budget would not put a halt to that. I can assure you we would still be taking our government to task where we felt it was needed. But to continue to just say that we must refuse, we must be able to continue running this council our way, the whole council's way, not just the Conservative way, for everybody. So for me, I feel that sometimes we just have to hold our nose and do the right thing. So I would urge everybody to do the right thing and vote this budget through, and then we can fight together to get better deals. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fairclough. Councillor Cunningham.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Well, it's been quite a long night on this, and I've deliberately kept quiet just for so long to listen to everybody that I can see, and I've noticed that the submissions for speaking have now sort of seemed to be dropping to the end. And I wanted to listen to every single point I could and see if there was any kind of alternative suggestion coming from the opposition group that I could actually, that held some merit and could actually benefit what we have to do in delivering our legal responsibility. I have to say, sadly, I've had not one scintilla of a suggestion of something that would actually help the position. It is a sad position to be in, where we have to do things we don't want, where we have to deliver cuts of this nature. Of course, we must remember that of the figure we keep talking about, 8 million of this was moved forward into this budget from the previous Labour administration. That shouldn't be forgotten. That said, it shouldn't be about political point scoring. It doesn't matter what party you belong to. You are a member of this council, and your duty as a member of the council is to try and do the best for Bolton. As many people have said in different guises tonight, we just need to get on with this, and as again, so much has already been said, continue to lobby government to try and redress any shortfalls that we've got. But to simply play politics with it and say we're not delivering this, and we're going to put the future of the people of Bolton services into the hands of faceless administrators from Whitehall is not a way to deliver the responsibility that you have as a councillor. I'm urging that we support this, the actual motion. I will be supporting probably both Councillor Heslop's amendment and Councillor Hayes' amendment, and then of course the full substantive motion, and I would urge everybody else to do so. We have an absolute responsibility legally and more importantly to the people of this town to do so. Thank you.
If he wants to speak. Sorry, I was just checking that nobody else wishes to speak. With nobody indicating, so now Councillor Greenosh, would you like to use your right of reply?
If I could, please, Madam Mayor. Thank you. And first of all, I would like to thank everybody. I mean, it has been a very full, very open, very honest debate, and I would like to thank everybody who has participated in that. I haven't agreed with everyone that's participated in it, but thank you for all those that have. And I am going to be trying to be as pragmatic as I can with my responses. Although I have listened with some incredulity to Labour councillor after Labour councillor proposing to simply refuse and say no to this budget, and to say no to anything that delivers this level of cuts. And why I find it, and I don't question, and I know a number of my colleagues have already questioned this, is because, as I pointed out in my speech, I don't know of one other Labour run authority that is refusing. There are those that saying, and the quote from Robert Jenrick was that due to the pandemic and due to a level of mismanagement, some councils have found themselves in this position. I don't want to say that the last administration left us in a position where we inherited mismanagement, but I do know that what the last administration did under both Councillor Morris and Councillor Thomas was accept that legal responsibility. And I, like many others who are sat in this meeting this evening, will have sat through those budget meetings where they have been disrupted by cries from the galleries, many of them from their own Labour colleagues. We've had the gallery actually evacuated because of that level of disruption. And yet that legal responsibility then, despite the hatred then of the government for putting these cuts upon us and austerity, answered back to those cries, answered back to those shouts. We have a legal responsibility. Where has that responsibility gone this evening? Or is it just because you are no longer the ruling group and therefore you feel you can play politics with this budget? And that is unacceptable. It's unacceptable, as Councillor Fairclough says, that you have Councillor Sylvester at the end coming up with individual lines on the budget when not a mention over months, not a mention of any lines in any individual Labour spokesperson's portfolio of any lines in the budget that they wanted anyone to relook at. And that comes also from a chair of a scrutiny Chair of Corporate Scrutiny, Councillor Sylvester, where the budget only last week was the main item on the agenda, where our Borough Treasurer, Deputy Chief Executive gave a full outline, 3 full papers, detailed papers of the budget and the detail behind it, the legal responsibilities. And how many questions at that corporate scrutiny came from Labour members? Not one. Not one member asking questions about that scrutiny, about the scrutiny of the budget. It really is a dereliction of duty and a total disregard of what is, as well as has been accepted tonight and has been explained by officers to groups, the legal responsibility we have as an authority. And people, Councillor McMulkin talked about own the consequences. We do want to own the consequences, Councillor McMulkin. That is why we want the decisions to go through with full scrutiny to exec member meetings, so members have the right to challenge and look at the proposals in more detail. We want to own those consequences because we won't be owning any consequences when those commissioners come in and start to make those decisions for us. Councillor Howarth, have I been lobbying? Well, I have been lobbying, Councillor Howarth. Am I disappointed? Of course I'm disappointed. But I don't think even you would be cynical enough to think that we would just have got a deal. Even this government have just given us a backroom deal for Bolton. It would have been a deal for the rest of the country. We will continue to lobby. Excellent point made by Councillor Flitcroft. We will continue to lobby. And if we continue to get more money, then we'll be able to adjust some of the savings, and let's hope we can, but we will continue to lobby. And all I can say to Councillor Howarth, and I hope she's got a good contract on her phone bill, because I know she's been ringing literally non-stop people all week, trying to understand how they'll be voting and trying to change those votes. She should have been ringing her own Labour MPs, because as I said in my speech, where were the Labour MPs at challenging this local government settlement? We've heard bravado from all our Labour colleagues tonight about the disgrace. Where were the Labour MPs challenging that local government settlement? Not a single objection. It didn't even go to a vote. It was passed unanimously because the major opposition party in Parliament did not raise a single objection. Not even a vote on it. Passed unanimously. To Councillor Allen, I would say, as Councillor Morgan, his former colleague, pointed out, there's considerable innovation going on, but I have to remind him, we are a minority administration. If we'd have even thought the thought of us doing radical strategic advice, told him the timescales, and he has had this answered, and I know by the Borough Treasurer as well as myself. It just didn't allow him timescales to come up with that. But also, we have to accept, and this has to be a pragmatic, the idea that we would have produced an ideological budget with the hope of taking a majority of members with us is just not, I'm afraid, achievable. To Councillor Donaghy, who said, voting again, I cannot vote against amendments, any of these amendments, because they don't sufficiently alter the motion. Well, at least they put amendments in. You've not done anything to even alter the motion. You've not done anything at all as the major opposition in this town to come up with an alternative that fulfills our legal requirements.
Shame.
So I think it is, we are in a state, I have been, as I said from the start, this is a terrible decision for this council to have to make. But we have done it in a pragmatic way and by protecting those which we believe are those services that protect our most vulnerable. And that is as well as adhering to our statutory obligations. I do urge all members to support this budget and to work with us through these budget proposals as we bring them forward through executive cabinet member meetings. Madam Mayor, I have nothing more to say. I made the points earlier, and I have pleasure. I'll just deal with the amendments if I can. Sorry, Madam Mayor. In terms of the amendments, I do have some concerns over Councillor Heslop's amendment in the way it can be used. But in principle, I see we don't object, and as a group, we will be supporting Councillor Heslop's amendment. I am concerned that it does. I think residents in our borough respond a great more to seeing councillors who are active and engaged in their communities rather than a councillor who's prepared to write a cheque out. Councillors can do both. I value those councillors that have given up their jobs and work full time and maybe not be in the same position to give a donation as others could be. So I think there does have to be a degree of unanimity. I wouldn't like it to be anonymity, and I wouldn't like it to be used for political purposes. But we will be supporting it because the principle that it be used in their own area is one we can support. In terms of the Liberal Democrat First Amendment, I think by the fact that I will say that as a group we will support it, shows our commitment to speak up against our government. We aren't too fond of some of the language. We wish you hadn't used a trick that opposition parties often do of going too far to make us unable to support it. We don't like the use of diabolical, we don't like the condemning, but we are and I have actively spoken out against the government in terms of the way local government has been funded, and I will continue to do so. So we will be supporting that. I don't think it will come as a surprise to you that we won't be supporting Councillor Wilkinson's. I apologise, Councillor Wilkinson. I don't think you had any hopes. You knew our submission into the Commission was for the status quo. And what I would say on that is I agree with comments that were made earlier in terms of our representation in how we represent and elected members is not affected. And I see no actual other GM authorities looking at reductions and those that have had cover. So we are also mindful as well that we have to look at the wider picture now and responsibilities we all have within GM. So in many cases, workloads have actually increased. So that's our position on our amendments, Madam Mayor, and I'll let you move forward to the votes. Thank you very much.
Well done, leader. Well done.
Here.
Could you all mute your mics, please? It's a bit difficult for me to hear when everybody's shouting at me. Thank you, Councillor Greenhouse. Thank you, Leader, for that. The Chief Executive will now take a name vote on the amendments in the order they were submitted. Councillor Heslop's amendment is the first to be considered. Chief Exec.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a couple of points before we start the vote. We will take this very slowly to give everyone an opportunity to get their point across. Am I being heard? Just checking. Yeah, lovely. Thank you. The second thing is just to say that one of our councillors on the call tonight on the meeting, Councillor Wright, is on a mobile phone. I think we've sorted the problem he was having earlier in the meeting, but in an exceptional situation, if necessary, Madam Mayor has agreed that if for some reason we cannot get him to speak on the phone, he will text his message of his decision, which will go to the Democratic Services Officer, Vicky Ridge. But I think we will be able to avoid that. We want to make sure that everyone's voice is heard in terms of this vote. So let's start. So I'm starting. Here we go. Councillor Baines.
This is Councillor Heslop's motion for.
It is Councillor Heslop's motion first. Thank you, Councillor Baines. Councillor Baines.
4.
Thank you. Councillor Connor.
4.
Councillor Cox.
4.
Councillor Cunningham.
4.
Councillor Dean.
4.
Councillor Fairclough.
4.
Councillor Galloway.
4.
Councillor Greenhouse.
4.
Councillor Haslam.
4.
Councillor Hewitt.
4.
Councillor Morgan.
4.
Councillor Muslim.
4.
Councillor Radcliffe.
4.
Councillor Walsh.
4.
Councillor Warren. Councillor Warren, can you just repeat that, please?
4.
Thank you. Councillor Waters.
4.
Councillor Abdullah.
Against.
Councillor Adia.
Against.
Councillor Ayub.
Against.
Councillor Donaghy.
Against.
Councillor Evans.
Against.
Councillor Howarth.
Against.
Councillor Ibrahim.
Against.
Councillor Iqbal.
Against.
Councillor Karam.
Against.
Councillor McKeon.
Against.
Councillor Mystery.
Against.
Councillor Morris.
Against.
Councillor Murray.
Against.
Councillor Peel.
Against.
Councillor Sherrington.
Against.
Councillor Sylvester.
Against.
Councillor Thomas.
Against.
Councillor Zaman.
Against.
Councillor Hayes.
4. Did you hear me? That was 4.
Thank you, Councillor Hayes. Councillor McGeehan.
4.
Councillor Newell.
4.
Councillor Vevers.
4.
Councillor Wilkinson.
4.
Councillor Flitcroft.
4.
Councillor Patterson.
4.
Councillor Sanders.
4.
Councillor Weatherby.
4.
Councillor Darvish.
Against.
Councillor Ishmael.
4.
Councillor McMulkin.
4.
Councillor Allen.
Against.
Councillor Fletcher.
Against.
Councillor Parkinson.
4.
Councillor Brady.
4.
Councillor Wright.
4.
Councillor Gibbon.
4.
Councillor Hornby.
4.
Councillor Bullock.
4.
Councillor Cunliffe.
Sorry, 4.
Thank you, Councillor Cunliffe. And Councillor Heslop.
4.
Okay, just 1 second while we confirm the result. Okay. Could people mute the speakers, please? Councillor, if councillors could mute, because we're getting terrible feedback. Okay, someone muted me there. Can you hear me now? Right, here we go. Councillor Heslop's amendment has been carried and amends the original motion in the name of Councillor Greenhouse. Madam Mayor, Councillor Hayes has indicated he would like to propose an amendment understanding Order 17. Would you ask Councillor Hayes to move his amendment, please, to the substantive motion?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chief Exec. Councillor Hayes, would you like to move your amendment? You do have, however, have no right of reply and no time limit on the move, but I would hope after what you've already said to us that perhaps you could just add some additional information, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't think I have anything I wish to add previously. Our amendment is just as valid now. The new substantive motion is there, so I formally move it.
Thank you, Councillor Hayes. Councillor Newell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to formally second.
What's going on?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Newell.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I will now take the votes. Hang on just 1 second.
Apologies, getting directions here. I should have said then, before handing over to the Chief, the amendment is before you. I would now open the debate if anybody would like to say anything on the amendment.
Already said it.
Come on.
Right, okay, sorry, I'm hearing somebody in the background here. Yes, well, I'm trying to do everything procedurally right so that I don't become criticised for doing it wrong. Okay, so now I'll take it over to the Chief because nobody's indicated they wish to speak on Councillor Hayes' amendment.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. So here we go again. So this is now voting on the amendment from Councillor Hayes. Are we ready? Councillor Baines.
4.
Councillor Connor.
4.
Councillor Cox.
4.
Councillor Cunningham.
4.
Councillor Dean.
4.
Councillor Fairclough.
4.
Councillor Galloway.
4.
Councillor Greenhouse.
4.
Councillor Haslam.
4.
Councillor Hewitt.
4.
Councillor Morgan.
4.
Councillor Muslim.
4.
Councillor Radcliffe. Councillor Radcliffe.
4.
Councillor Walsh.
4.
Councillor Warren.
4.
Councillor Watters.
4.
Councillor Abdullah.
Against.
Councillor Adia.
Against.
Councillor Ayub.
Against.
Councillor Donaghy.
Against.
Councillor Evans.
Against.
Councillor Howarth.
Against.
Councillor Ibrahim.
Against.
Councillor Iqbal. Councillor Iqbal.
Against.
Councillor Karam.
Against.
Councillor McKeon.
Against.
Councillor Mistry.
Against.
Councillor Morris.
Against.
Councillor Murray.
Against.
Councillor Peel.
Against.
Councillor Sherrington.
Against.
Councillor Sylvester.
Against.
Councillor Thomas. Councillor Thomas has said against. There's a slight technical issue with the computer, so if we could log that, please. Democratic Services. So Thomas against. Councillor Zaman.
Against.
Thank you. Councillor Hayes. Councillor Hayes.
4. Trying to unmute. Sorry, I'm 4.
Thank you. Councillor McGeehan.
4.
Councillor Newell.
4.
Councillor Vivers.
4.
Councillor Wilkinson.
4.
Councillor Flitcroft.
4.
Councillor Patterson.
4.
Councillor Sanders.
4.
Councillor Weatherby.
4.
Councillor Darvish.
Against.
Councillor Ishmael.
4.
Councillor McMulkin.
Against.
Councillor Allen.
4.
Councillor Fletcher.
Against.
Councillor Parkinson.
4.
Councillor Brady.
4.
Councillor Wright.
4.
Councillor Gibbon.
4.
Councillor Hornby.
4.
Councillor Bullock.
4.
Councillor Cunliffe.
4.
Councillor Heslop.
4.
So Councillor Hayes' amendment has been carried and amends the original motion in the names of Councillor Greenhouse and Councillor Heslop. Madam Mayor, Councillor Wilkinson has indicated he would like to propose an amendment under Standing Order 17. Would you ask Councillor Wilkinson to move his amendment, please, to the substantive motion?
Councillor Wilkinson, again, there's no time limit on your speech and there's no right of reply. If you'd like to perhaps add something additional to your previous comments, I would be very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. I think the debate was quite clear, and therefore I would no further additional comments to make. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. Councillor Vivers.
I would like to formally second the motion.
Thank you, Councillor Vivers. The Chief will now take the name vote on the amendment. Oh, sorry, forgetting. If anybody would like to join in the debate, could they indicate now, please? I'm getting above myself here. Nobody's indicating in chat. Is that correct, that nobody wishes to speak? Okay, then. The Chief Exec will now take a name vote on the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So here we go again. Councillor Baines.
Against.
Councillor Connor.
Against.
Councillor Cox.
Against.
Councillor Cunningham.
Against.
Councillor Dean.
Against.
Councillor Fairclough.
Against.
Councillor Galloway.
Against.
Councillor Greenhouse.
Against.
Councillor Haslam. Councillor Haslam.
Against.
Councillor Hewitt.
Against.
Councillor Morgan.
Against.
Councillor Muslim.
Against.
Councillor Radcliffe.
Against.
Councillor Walsh.
Against.
Councillor Warren.
Against.
Councillor Waters.
Against.
Councillor Abdullah.
Against.
Councillor Adia.
Against.
Councillor Ayub.
Against.
Councillor Donaghy.
Against.
Councillor Evans.
Against.
Councillor Howarth. Councillor Howarth. Apologies, Councillor Howarth. Councillor Ibrahim.
Against.
Councillor Iqbal.
Against.
Councillor Karam.
Against.
Councillor McKeon.
Against.
Councillor Mistry.
Against.
Councillor Morris.
Against.
Councillor Murray.
Against.
Councillor Peel.
Against.
Councillor Sherrington.
Against.
Councillor Sylvester.
Against.
Councillor Thomas.
Against.
Councillor Zaman.
Against.
Councillor Hayes.
For.
Councillor McGeehan.
For.
Councillor Newell.
For.
Councillor Beavers.
For.
Councillor Wilkinson.
For.
Councillor Flitcroft.
Against.
Councillor Patterson.
Against.
Councillor Sanders.
Against.
Councillor Weatherby.
Against.
Councillor Darvish.
Against.
Councillor Ishmael.
Against.
Councillor McMulkin.
Against.
Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Fletcher.
Against.
Councillor Parkinson.
Against.
Councillor Brady.
Against.
Councillor Wright.
Against.
Councillor Gibbon.
Against.
Councillor Hornby.
Against.
Councillor Bullock.
Against.
Councillor Cunliffe.
Against.
Councillor Heslop.
Against.
Yeah, that amendment is lost.
Right. Chief Exec, it's over to you again. The next item of business.
Just 1 second.
Sorry.
You're on mute.
Yes, we know, Councillor Hayes. We're just checking process, making sure that we've got everything organised, because it's been a long evening. Just 1 second.
Chief Exec.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Heslop, Councillor Hayes, amendments have been carried and amends the original motion now in the name of Councillor Greenhalgh.
Okay. Do you want me to repeat that? Okay, sorry, we're getting confused with our speeches here. The Chief Exec will now take a name vote on the substantive motion.
Okay. So just for summary again, this is the motion of Councillor Greenhalgh with the amendments from Councillor Heslop and Councillor Hayes. So just for absolute clarity, here we go. Councillor Baines.
4.
Councillor Connor.
4.
Councillor Cox.
4.
Councillor Cunningham.
4.
Councillor Dean.
4.
Councillor Fairclough.
4.
Councillor Galloway.
4.
Councillor Greenhalgh.
4.
Councillor Haslam.
4.
Councillor Hewitt.
4.
Councillor Morgan.
4.
Councillor Muslim.
4.
Councillor Radcliffe.
4.
Councillor Walsh.
4.
Councillor Warren.
4.
Councillor Watters.
4.
Councillor Abdullah.
Against.
Councillor Adia.
Against.
Councillor Ayub.
Against.
Councillor Donaghy.
Against.
Councillor Evans.
Against.
Councillor Howarth.
Against.
Councillor Ibrahim. Councillor Ibrahim.
Against.
Councillor Iqbal.
Against.
Councillor Karam.
Against.
Councillor McKeon.
Against.
Councillor Mistry.
Against.
Councillor Morris.
Against.
Councillor Murray.
Against.
Councillor Peel.
Against.
Councillor Sherrington.
Against.
Councillor Sylvester.
Against.
Councillor Thomas.
Against.
Councillor Zaman.
Against.
Councillor Hayes.
Abstain.
Councillor McGeehan.
Abstain.
Councillor Newell.
Abstain.
Councillor Beavers.
Abstain.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Abstain.
Councillor Flitcroft.
4.
Councillor Patterson.
4.
Councillor Sanders.
4.
Councillor Weatherby.
4.
Councillor Darvish.
Against.
Councillor Ishmael.
Against.
Councillor McNulty.
Against.
Councillor Allen.
Abstain.
Councillor Fletcher.
Against.
Councillor Parkinson.
4.
Councillor Brady.
4.
Councillor Wright.
4.
Councillor Gibbon.
4.
Councillor Hornby. Can you say that again, Councillor Hornby?
4.
Councillor Bullock.
4.
Councillor Cunliffe.
4.
Councillor Heslop.
4.
The motion is carried. Are we back in the room?
We can hear you, but your pictures are frozen.
Right, are we back on? Can they hear us?
Voice, we can hear voice only, Tony. No, your pictures are static.
Yeah. If councillors could switch any cameras off at the minute, we've just got a problem with the outage. So just bear with us 1 minute, please.
Come into effect.
Okay, you're
If
back
you're
on.
leaving, Linda. Okay, we're back on. Linda, Madam Mayor, you need to come back in. She just said she was leaving. Okay, can councillors hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Donna.
Yes, Chief.
Yes, and we can see you.
Not a pretty sight at this time of evening, I have to say. Just for absolute clarity and confirmation, the motion was carried, and then we lost power to the system. Madam Mayor is in the chamber with us. She's just been reconnected into the system. She's incapacitated, as she says, and then as soon as the Madam Mayor's back into the meeting, she will take back over, and then obviously we will move on to the next items on the agenda, and we will carry on for the minute. So just bear with us, councillors. I know it's been a long evening, and I really am indebted for your patience and the way you're handling yourselves this evening. It's not been an easy set of conversations. Just 1 minute. Yeah, I think I'm. Hang on a minute. Let me. Right, councillors again, just to say what's happening in a second is that Madam Mayor's computer seems to have given the ghost up, literally. It's whirring around. So what we're going to do is transfer her to another laptop. You won't physically be able to see her, but you will be able to hear her. So Madam Mayor will be in control of the council meeting in the chamber, and obviously we will help her manage the debate in terms of notifying her of who will be wanting to raise comments at various points. We've got onto the agenda now that the motion is lost. So Madam Mayor, when she starts in a second, the next item of business will be consider local council tax. Oh, sorry, the motion was carried. Apologies, I'm tired. The motion is carried. Sorry for any heart attacks there for anyone, or pleasure for others. Madam Mayor, the next item of business is to consider the local council tax support scheme. We will do that in a couple of minutes as soon as we're ready to go. Thank you. Are we ready to do that? Will Linda's voice carry?
Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Yes.
Right, okay. So I'm going to start from the top. Madam Mayor, are you ready? So the motion is carried. Madam Mayor, the next item of business is to consider the local council tax support scheme.
Councillor Greenock's turn to speak, please.
Can you take on the cameras?
Yeah, do you want to try and do it? Can you do it? Come over and do it.
I'm still waiting for the red box, Tony.
Sorry, Councillor Greenock, you're frozen. We won't be a moment.
Sorry.
So we're trying to reconnect everybody.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm glad you rectified that, Tony. I nearly choked on a biscuit there, but anyway, I'm moving very much to the recommendation to council, and I had pleasure in proposing regards the local council tax support scheme that the proposals as detailed in the report in relation to that scheme be approved with effect from the 1st of April 2022. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Try again, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Cox, can you turn your camera on, please?
I didn't want to make matters worse.
No, you were fine. It's
I formally second and reserve the right to speak.
he has. You know, you're opening the debate.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members.
Yeah.
The Conservative group don't plan to implement this policy until April 2022, which is a sign that it is indeed the wrong policy and the wrong thing to do. The payment amount is currently at 12.5%, and the increase of the payment amount is going up to 17.5%. And I remain opposed to the fact that something like 15% wasn't even considered. I mean, the increase, I do talk in percentages because it sort of people understand that. The increase was a 40% rise, and really it's what you...
She's put it in mute. Councillor Howarth, you've accidentally put it on mute.
I'm sorry, I don't know how that happened. So I was saying...
Oh God, she's on again.
Councillor Howarth, you've accidentally put that in on mute again. I'm not sure if it's you or the system, but apologies, but it's on mute.
Right, it isn't me, so I'm going to need some help from somebody. I'd be most grateful. I'll try my best to keep an eye on it, but
thank you.
It's not me.
No, okay.
I need to speed up. So of course it was particularly awful to see that there was a desire to even look at a 60% or an 80% rise, and even higher than that, and that was considered. And of course I'm keen to say that I am ashamed that the government forces councils to this sort of position. And the backstory to this, of course, is the almost exclusive reliance that the government wants for councils.
So they've muted you again.
Right, I know it's not me, Chief Executive.
Right,
cutting council tax heavily. This is where the problem comes in at £1.5 million, or of course there was even consideration of 2.2 million, which is seriously problematic. There's never been enough political context on the papers, I would say, about the lives that are affected by these changes. The council should not be being forced to take money away from very low income families just because the Conservative government can't be bothered to help the borough in a way that is just and fair in terms of human dignity. The current situation for too many in Bolton is deprivation, and then you do find debt where you find deprivation. Of course, there's been good use of the £20 uplift, for example, of universal credit under the pandemic. We need this to continue to help people, but when you look across at the statements that we've had from citizens' advice on some of these issues, the people that make the applications for the council tax reduction scheme that are able to qualify for this, when you look at the statements, the many people in the Bolton Borough behind on their bills, get behind on council tax, get into problems with rent arrears. Those statements came out about that in December and also earlier in July. And the government, therefore, of the day is forcing councils to take money off people who are in dire straits. Now, the government formula does take some account of deprivation, but it's not enough to benefit a borough like Bolton that was so unfairly and badly hit by the austerity policies. Charges should not be raised on some of the people who have the least here in this borough. We're tired of the government piling on extra funding streams to be found, moreover, on the council tax as precepts. This is the backdrop of injustice that means the council makes policy to take more council tax money from people who do live in hardship already, people who are already needing government welfare to get by. I do not support the higher percentage increase as set out in the paper this evening. Thank you, Madam Mayor, and everybody for bearing with me.
Right, thank you, Councillor Howarth. Apologies for that. My system went. Sorry, apologies for that. My system went down. The next speaker is Councillor Peel.
Thanks, Madam Mayor, and I'll not keep members here longer than necessary, especially as the gremlins appear to have be attacking us at the moment. I just wanted to make one very quick point. Had the recommendations from Cabinet been proposed to be implemented in this forthcoming financial year, we may well have been voting against this. And I accept, and I said this at Cabinet when we discussed this, that these proposals are being delayed for 12 months. Members need to remember that they're being delayed only for 12 months, and the minutes of that Cabinet decision do make it quite clear that the proposals will come back to Cabinet before the next council budget. So on that basis, it would be wrong of us to oppose these measures now. Therefore, we will be abstaining.
Thank you, Councillor Peel. Councillor Headlock.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wouldn't be able to accept this motion. I would have to vote against it. I asked for some data on the consequences of the original 12.5% council tax support reduction, which meant that anybody working age paid 12.5% towards the council tax. Now, the consequences of that, particularly in Kersley and Falmouth, that 1,153 people that previously didn't pay anything to their council tax had received court summons and had been summoned to court, and a further 241 of those people were passed on to bailiffs. So these were the people that previously received 100% help with their council tax. These are some of the least well-off people in the borough, in Falmouth and Kersley. Now, the proposed increase of 40% in the amount that the least well-off will have to pay is, I feel, going to push up to 50% the people that had previously had 100% support being taken to court. As we all know, the cost of recovering this council tax and taking people through the court process, dragging them through the court process, resulting in bailiffs knocking at the door, the costs in many cases are actually higher than the amount that the resident has been summoned for. And it's also, I don't really agree necessarily with just a simple thing that an increase of from 12.5% to 17.5% will produce this money. And if it's just a calculated figure without considering the human intervention and the human cost, the toll on personnel that need to intervene in many of these processes or at many stages, particularly when this is going into the recovery stage, where actually there is significant staff costs. I think we've got to consider all of this, and what I would hope is that members were to request qualitative data, particularly in their areas or postcodes that is available before they actually agree to this change. I think you'll find that to put 50% of our least well-off residents through the court system, bailiffs knocking at the door, without considering all other options, is something that we can't do. And I'm afraid I cannot agree to this proposal. Thank you.
Right, there's nobody else indicated to speak. So, Councillor Greenhalgh, do you wish to use your right of reply?
Please, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Greenhalgh, I'm so sorry. In all the confusion, I couldn't hear what Councillor Cox or yourself said. Councillor Cox did actually ask for a right to reply. So can I take him first, please?
Absolutely.
Fairness? Thank you.
I think actually, Madam Mayor, I just reserve the right to reply. I think I would be doing councillors, officers and yourself a big favour if I let Councillor Greenhalgh finish this debate.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Councillor Cox. Councillor Greenhalgh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Can I first of all thank Councillor Peel for his words, first of all, because he probably is, like me, a little bit bemused, because this, of course, is a line that has just been voted for in the budget. I want to give you a little bit of his background on this. It was brought up in many briefings that we had, because it was part of a involvement of this particular line that had to see £400,000 going back in from the 3 million that came from the settlement. And the reason for that is the assumption built in by officers was to go to 20%. And as those of you that know it, it was in my portfolio. After the consultation, there was certainly not the support for the 20% increase. There was a level of support for the 17.5. There was an acknowledgement that people saw a need for the increase, not huge numbers, as you can imagine, but it was a certain proportion. And I made the decision that I did not want to go to 20%, and therefore it would be the 5% rise from the 12.5 to 17.5, and therefore we had to find £400,000 to balance the budget in terms of being able to achieve that. Just in terms of where we are in terms of benchmarking, in terms of other GM authorities, it brings us very much into the middle. So, and you know, I have to point out these are Labour authorities. 3 GM Labour authorities have a greater top slice than 17.5. 2 are on 20%. 1 is on 25%. And another authority is equal to us on 17.5, and that's before any other budget proposals move forward. So we have done our best to bring us in line with other GM authorities. I do really also have to point out, just from a historical basis, if for nothing else, that this was a scheme that was brought in under the Blair government, and it was brought in at 12.5%. So I do want to acknowledge that, you know, it's not the, you know, all the nasty Tories' fault. Again, this was a scheme that was brought in under a Labour government, and it hasn't seen rises in line with other GM authorities. And so it was something, and any reduction of this now would mean an alteration of the budget. So it is worth noting that. I do also accept that this is, as Councillor Peel says, this is for proposals starting 1st of April 2022. And that is because government put in money to help us this year because of the money to alleviate this kind of support. And so this was not necessary to implement this year. And Councillor Peel is absolutely right. There was a promise given and guarantee made that it would come back in the, as it has to do, it's a statutory obligation for it to come back at the equivalent time in the next municipal year. So I think those are important things for all members to realise. There will be another bite at the cherry at this, but this is acknowledging, as this is a statutory obligation, it is acknowledging that nothing for this year and the intention for next year. So just a little bit of background there, but this has already gone through tonight as part of the budget. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
So do we not need a vote? We still need one. Right. Sorry. Thank you, Councillor Greenosh. We still need to have a name vote though, Councillor Greenosh. Chief Exec.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just wait for the red light. Thank you. So here we go, councillors.
Bolton again, yeah.
So yes, we are. If you could just wait, councillors, if you're on with your microphones on, can you just obviously not have conversations offline, because we're now going to the vote. Councillor Baines.
4.
Councillor Connor.
4.
Councillor Cox.
4.
Councillor Cunningham.
4.
Councillor Dean.
4.
Councillor Fairclough.
4.
Councillor Galloway.
4.
Councillor Greenhouse.
4.
Councillor Haslam.
4.
Councillor Hewitt.
4.
Councillor Morgan.
4.
Councillor Muslim.
4.
Councillor Radcliffe.
4.
Councillor Walsh.
4.
Councillor Warren.
4.
Councillor Watters.
4.
Councillor Abdullah.
Abstain.
Councillor Adia. Councillor Adia. I'm going to move on. Councillor Ayub.
Abstain.
Councillor Donaghy.
Abstain.
Councillor Evans.
Abstain.
Councillor Howarth. Councillor Howarth. Councillor Ibrahim.
Abstain.
Councillor Iqbal.
Abstain.
Councillor Karam.
Abstain.
Councillor Nakia.
Abstain.
Councillor Mistry.
Abstain.
Councillor Morris.
Abstain.
Councillor Murray.
Abstain.
Councillor Peel.
Abstain.
Councillor Shevington.
Abstain.
Councillor Sylvester.
Abstain.
Councillor Thomas.
Abstain.
Councillor Zaman.
Abstain.
And I think I'm going to go back one more final time. Councillor Adia. We think he's left or he's lost connection.
Sorry, I'm back against.
Oh, brilliant. Councillor Adia.
I think he said against.
Against.
Said
Okay.
against.
Okay, thank you. I'm relying on you. Councillor Ibrahim. Howarth, sorry, Councillor Howarth. Yeah, my apologies. Councillor Howarth. Councillor Howarth. I believe you're on mute, Councillor Howarth. Okay, we'll try one more time at the end. Councillor Hayes.
Abstain.
Councillor McGeehan.
Abstain.
Councillor Newell.
Abstain.
Councillor Beavers. Councillor Beavers. Councillor Wilkinson.
Abstain.
Councillor Flitcroft.
For.
Councillor Patterson.
For.
Councillor Sanders.
For.
Councillor Weatherby.
For.
Councillor Darvish.
Against.
Councillor Ishmael.
Against.
Councillor McMulkin.
Against.
Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Fletcher.
Abstain.
Councillor Parkinson.
For.
Councillor Brady.
For.
Councillor Wright.
For.
Councillor Gibbon.
For.
Councillor Hornby. Councillor Bullock.
For.
Councillor Cunliffe.
Abstain.
Councillor Heslop.
Against.
And I'm just going to test, go back to two other councillors. Councillor Howarth. Okay, Councillor Beavers. Okay, we'll draw close there. Just 1 second.
27, 22.
Councillors, the motion is carried. Madam Mayor, the next item of business is to deal with the minutes of the proceedings of the planning committee.
Councillor Dean. Sorry. Councillor Dean.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, was that for the planning committee? If it is, that's Councillor Walsh.
Sorry. Sorry, I've got incorrect information here. Sorry, Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Madam Mayor, members of the council, I'd like to move the minutes of the proceedings of the meeting of the planning committee held on the 7th of January, 4th of February 2021 be approved.
Yeah. Thank you, Councillor Walsh. Councillor Ayub.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, I formally second the proceeding of planning committee meetings.
Are these agreed?
Aye.
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 Okay, thank you, Councillor. Thank you.
Tony, have you missed out item 7 on the agenda?
No, we're going back to it now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's for so I'm sorry about this. It's licensing, isn't it? Yeah, I'm sorry. We haven't forgotten. We just got them in a different order. Chief. Licensing.
Shut up.
Right, councillors.
Apology.
Right. Thank you, Madam Mayor. The next item of business is to deal with the minutes of the proceedings of the scrutiny committee.
Councillor Dean. Councillor Donaghy.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have been called many things in my time, and I've been called early sometimes, but I've never been called Councillor Dean. Anyway, Madam Mayor, I move the proceedings of the scrutiny committees as are before council and laid out in the abstract with the attached dates. I formally move.
Thank you, Councillor Donaghy. Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I formally second and move the minutes of the Corporate and External Issues Scrutiny Committee as set out on the order paper. Thank you again.
Are these agreed, councillors?
Aye.
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 Thank you. Chief Exec. Motion's under standing order for
Changes to committee membership.
right.
Councillor
Okay.
Dean to move, Councillor Curran. I don't need anything to straight out.
Right. Apologies, councillor. The next item are changes to committee membership. Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, members. Finally, Councillor Donaghy, you must be absolutely honoured. Must be one of the greatest nights of your life tonight to be associated with myself. Madam Mayor, members of the council, I'd like to propose the changes to committee membership and the appointments of outside bodies as per on the order paper.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. Councillor Karam.
Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of the council. I formally second the motion.
Are these agreed?
Aye.
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 Thank you very much. Carried. Chief Exec, sorry. Yeah. Chief Exec.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. The next item of business is to consider motions under Standing Order 4.
As we move into this motion, which is in the name of Councillor Peel, in connection with council finances, as it's getting quite late, could I suggest that we limit the debate to half an hour, if possible, with people being quite succinct? Oh, I've got a point of order from Councillor Walsh. Thank you, Councillor Walsh.
Madam point of order, under Standing Order 1A of the Standing Orders relating to proceedings of the meeting of the council and other formal meetings, which says that the meetings of the council should be set at the annual meeting of the council. The annual meeting of the council, the 20th of May 2020, this evening's meeting was agreed, but was to be only meeting. That was further emphasised in documents which have come out in the last few days. And I ask, therefore, under Standing Order, why it is that we are now taking notice of motions that would normally be dealt with at the ordinary meeting of the council.
Thank you for your interjection, Councillor Walsh. I'm going to hand over to our expert on this, Helen Gorman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Unfortunately, Councillor Walsh, there's nothing in the standing orders that precludes motions under Standing Order 4 to be considered at Budget Setting Council, but I'd be happy to recommend that we take forward a review of standing orders and the financial procedure rules because of the issues that have raised at this council meeting.
Okay. Thank you for that, Helen. Councillor Peel.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. To be honest, you've took me a bit by surprise there. I didn't think we'd be moving into this, but I don't want to be the most unpopular person in this council meeting at the moment. I do welcome a review, by the way, into the fact that it is convention and convention only, Councillor Walsh, that we only deal with the budget. And I think if you look back on the previous budget councils, we have looked at other motions. But Madam Mayor, to make things easier, I want to move the motion as it is on the order paper. Because I only had a very strict 5 minutes during the budget debate, I didn't get a chance to thank the officers and the staff who have put together the budget proposals. Even though we didn't agree with the budget proposals, we do recognise they still have a job to do, and are very professional officers at that. We do believe the decision was wrong, but I think it's too late at this time of night to reopen this debate. So I'm very happy to move the motion as it is on the order paper, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there a second of this motion, Councillor Zaman?
Madam Mayor, I formally second the motion.
Okay. The motion is before council. If anyone would like to speak. Right. Right.
suggesting let's stop debating it and debate it properly at the next meeting within your discretion. And Councillor Patterson is saying that her laptop is forcing her to shut down. Councillor Cliffcroft is saying the same thing, which has been forced to shut down.
Right, okay.
And we have Councillor Cox who's indicated he'd like to speak. Can we just perhaps switch up and off remote and consider
Right.
comments?
Could you just bear with us for a moment while I just get some direction from Helen on this? Okay, thank you. Right, apologies for that. Could I just say that Councillor Peel was unaware that we were going to get to this. We debate this as a motion at the next council, which is in 4 weeks' time, at March the 17th. If you would prefer to do that, that might be a better option than stifling debate and only a few people having the option to speak, because we would have to shorten the length of debate. So if councillors are okay with that, it's only 4 weeks, it's not the usual lengthy time before, and then you'll be able to give the motion justice. Are you content with that, everybody?
As the move of the motion, Madam, I'm quite happy with your ruling.
Okay, yeah, okay. So I know one or two of you are struggling actually as well with the internet connection. So it would mean that quite a few of you couldn't take part in the debate. So I think because of the hour now, I think we'll have no more motions. Can I thank you all for all your contributions this evening, and I will have a safe journey home, because I can't wish that for all of you, although one or two of you might be in the members' room. Okay, thank you very much for your attendance, and good night. Chief, did you want to say something?
Madam Mayor, for absolute clarity, that concludes the business of the council meeting. Any motion not debated this evening will be carried forward to the next council meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good
Good night.
Good night, Madam
Good night,
Mayor.
everyone.